Chapter 1, A Certain Butler's Diary, Prologue. Today was an auspicious day. The Iphelleta house had its third son delivered. His black hair had a striking resemblance to his mother's. His name is Riley. At least I have enough strength left to name him. Lady Iris smiled brightly. Age 0. The child spoke. It was a word other than mommy. He mumbled, finally. What did he mean? We never taught him that word. Age 1. I have secretly inspected young master's body to check his talent. I have never seen anyone with such talent in my 60 years. My head was filled with excitement and envy. Not as a butler, but as a swordsman. Was it because I'd seen talent that surpasses genius? I could not fall asleep that night. Age 2. The firstborn, Master Ryan, has won second place in the novice swordsmanship tournament. His competitors were all around the age of 14 to 15. He defeated them at the age of 9. The mates of the mansion are clamoring that he may surpass his father. Fools, the true genius is here. Age 3. Even if their mothers are different, watching his brothers train every day should arouse some curiosity. But the young master shows no interest in the sword. Simply watching this talent go undeveloped is driving me insane. Age 4. Maybe I'm getting impatient due to my age. I have given him a wooden sword. Unlike his usual intelligent self, for some unknown reason, he bawled his eyes out, screaming because he did not want to hold the sword. In the end, he never even swung it once. Was I too early? Age 5. The Iphelleta house has a bloodline that has been blessed by the sword. After the first son, the second-born, Master Lloyd, has done well in the novice tournament. As I carefully mentioned the idea to the young Master Riley, he replied with a smile, not doing it. Age 6. Ha! Just why? Age 7. Master Ryan has already learned to imbue mana into the blade. Within the mana was a pure and powerful essence. Therefore, his father gave Master Ryan the title of Geometry. Master Riley showed no reaction to the story. Ha! If only he would just hold a sword. Age 9. I am disheartened. I am sure there will be great achievements. Even if I ignore my bias as his servant. Even if I ignore his talent for the sword. He is a truly intelligent boy, and it crushes me. Today, Master Lloyd was given the title of Geometry. His speed was extraordinary, even beyond Master Stein's. Suddenly. Did I see it wrong? This thought occurred to me. Age 10. Master Stein finally made a decision. He suggested that the young master competes in the novice tournament. On that day, Master Riley disappeared from the mansion. Everyone in the mansion searched for him. 1 day, 2 days, 1 week. In the end, when the competitors of the tournament were decided, the young master showed himself. Hide and seek is fun. Isn't that right? He smiled brightly. Everyone in the mansion laughed nervously. My eyes weren't wrong. That's what I believed. Age 11. He naps in the apple tree in the gardens. Eats his meals. Reads a few books and goes to sleep. That's his daily routine. Sleeping 12 hours a day. Never touching a sword. Even Master Stein has given up on Master Riley. Age 12. For fuck's sake. Why won't he hold a sword? Age 13. Master Riley's laziness has reached the pinnacle of laziness. Even Master Stein has had it and went to give him a beating. Yet Master Riley had disappeared miraculously. Master Stein could not even find him. Wow! Age 14. One day, I decided to complain to the young master. Why won't you learn swordsmanship? Was he sleep-talking? He replied to my question. I managed to kill the demon lord, so I can take it easy, right? I couldn't understand his answer, and sighed. Age 15. Master Riley may be lazy, but there are times when things change. When he talks with his mother. The book I read was so interesting. I had a strange dream. Lady Iris always replied with a smile, always mentioning that his happiness is the most important to her. Age 16. It's been a long time since all members of the Iphelleta house were gathered together. Master Stein, his 2 wives, the 3 sons. After dinner, Master Stein made an announcement. I should start deciding on the successor. Master Riley was never mentioned in the discussion. Age 17. For the first time in my life, I have seen Master Riley seething with rage. Someone who wouldn't bat an eye for countless insults towards him. It was when his mother was ridiculed by the other sons because of Master Riley, as he was declared ineligible as a successor candidate. In that short moment, I saw the potential in his eyes. Master Stein also saw it. Age 18. During her meal, Lady Iris collapsed after coughing blood. As the table turned red with blood, Master Riley's face changed dramatically. And today, he raised a sword. Chapter 2, Heroes Exist to Save the World. Heroes exist to save the world. Those words make me sick. By luck, no, by horrible luck, I was blessed by the holy blade and forced onto the path of killing the demon lord. I had everyone's attention on me, and their hopes became the sole reason for me to push ahead. With the weight of the world on my shoulders, I pressed on, never resting. What was the reward for my deeds? To be idolized? To be an inspiration? I didn't want any of it. Another man could say, your reward is your adventure and the memories of your companions. Don't make me laugh. Memories of your companions? Let me say it again. Heroes exist to save the world, not to save their companions. The fate of my companions was always destined to be a cruel one. In order to defeat the demon lord who would destroy the world. Whether it was before or after he rose up in power. Of course, as a hero, as an individual, I tried my utmost to save those who were important to me. But the results had always been disastrous. The pain I felt as they whispered to me with their dying breaths. At least you managed to make it out alive. The path of a hero is filled with more sorrow than happiness. I could not fail to live up to their expectations. Even when I wandered on the borders of insanity, the people would put their hopes on my existence. Those days would continue as I fought on with blood in my mouth. Heroes may exist to save the world. But I fought for the eternal peace of death. I'd had enough of this life. The mysterious monsters who would invade our homes. The villains who dared to harm my friends. I had slain many. And saved the lives of many more from the jaws of death. And in the end, I managed to slay the demon lord. How high up was it? The clouds were laid out below him as he fell from the skies together with a giant. With red skin and a giant horn. The demon lord. Countless wounds were visible on his colossal body. He gritted his teeth and stared at his foe, struggling to retain consciousness. In his foe's right hand, the holy sword shone brightly. His foe was standing on top of his forehead. The hero who slayed the demon lord. What is going through your mind right now? The demon lord asked the hero. Although he felt nothing but fury towards him, he had no choice but to acknowledge his power. So he asked his foe, his equal, out of curiosity. If you're asking for my thoughts. The hero spoke. His face seemed somewhat pale as he fell towards certain death. After a small pause, he replied quietly. I'm tired. The demon lord could not understand his answer. What? Yes, this is enough, right? That was what he truly thought. Why? If it's not you, if you're not here, if you can't. He's heard it a million times. Only you can do it. It's impossible unless it's you. Only you can save them. You must protect them. To act as the symbol of their hope, to live up to their wishes. It had taken its toll on him. I'm just really tired. It was so hard to meet those gazes that were trying to hold on to what little faith they had. Honestly, I don't want it anymore. As he remembered all the lines about heroes that had been said to him, he looked down. He was falling. As he fell from the insane height, his clothes fluttered uncontrollably. The stars shone at the edge of his vision, and the cold winds swiped at him. Finally, it was difficult to keep his eyes open, so he half closed them. The clouds that had been far below him now caressed his body. The ground was getting closer. I'm almost there. The hero could see the ashen black buildings made of concrete. Every time he blinked, they were closer. It was moments before the final impact. Ah, this is the end. At this height, even the hero could not avoid instant death. He would become unrecognizable. With all the injuries and curses on him, resurrection was also impossible. The demon lord tilted his head in curiosity. Even after saving the world, after so much sacrifice, only death awaited him. Yet the hero was smiling. As if it was his greatest peace. Hey? Those two are falling. He was almost there. Through the people's shouting, he heard the demon lord's head hit the ground, making a sound like a tomato being crushed. And it was his turn soon after. And so, the hero fell. The successor. In the famed Iphelleta house. In the crowded inn, people were talking of the rumors about the selection of the Iphelleta house's new successor. Yet, the Finn Iphelleta house, which was famous for its swordsmanship, had 3 sons. The first, Ryan the Geometry, famous for his strength. The second, Lloyd the Sock Geometry, famous for his speed. The third, however, the successor will be one of those 3 sons. Only one of them will be chosen, right? Of course. Wouldn't it be Ryan, the eldest? Well, who knows? I heard that the second-born, Lloyd, is quite sharp too. I thought they were blessed to have 3 sons, but having so many has its troubles, too. It's a problem for all high-class families, especially such high nobles. For us peasants, sons are always better. Who knows, you might win something big if you have a beautiful daughter. Ha ha ha. With your face? Dream on, brother. If a village, a territory ruled by the Finn Iphelleta house. The inn was full of speculations about the new successor. From the sounds of things, it's either going to be the first or the second, is that right? Yeah, that's true. What about the third? Ah, well, apparently he is completely useless. He was born that way. A certain butler, who looked out of place in this inn, tightened his grip on his beer, as if he was trying to shatter the glass. He's a noble and yet he's known as the lazy. In a way, he's more famous than the other 2. The third. Famous within the Iphelleta house for his awe-inspiring laziness. Titled, N.A. Geometry. Riley. N.A. Geometry. Ha! Never heard of such disgrace in my life. You know how the Iphelleta house is famous for its swordsmanship? Well, apparently, he's never swung a damn sword in his life. Basically, he's beyond hopeless. The others nodded in agreement. So, what's the reason for it? Well, I heard he gets a seizure when he does. Nah, I heard he's got some allergy to it. Apparently he's more of a vegetable and can't even move. I heard he just lies on his bed all day. The old man who had been listening suddenly stood up, furious. His face was as red as an apple. You fucking sons of bit. The boy yawned, lying against an apple tree in the mansion grounds. To him, it was just another bed. Ah, I want some coke. He was the third son of the Iphelleta house, Riley. It's becoming more frequent. My dreams of the past. A world with concrete floors and skyscrapers. It was a reflection of his past life. Since the day he unintentionally pulled the holy sword from the ground, there were only battles. To prevent the destruction of the world with the coming of the demon lord, he had to slay countless monsters. Instead of being able to attend school with his friends, he had to force his way through numerous battles. He sighed as he remembered his past life from his dreams. It always comes back right when I'm about to forget. He scratched his head, remembering his phrase, "I want to have some Coke." Coke, hey. It was his favorite drink back in the past. Sadly, he did not know how to make it. Tisk. How I long for the burning sensation of the carbonated liquid pouring down my throat, but that's impossible now. As he thought to himself, he locked his fingers and stretched out his arms. Well, there's no need to repeat my past. I will live this life in peace. With his memories still intact, that was what he had thought upon being reincarnated into this world. To fight with a blade, to save the world. To become idolized, to be relied upon. It was unneeded. He would avoid any obstacles in his path. Thankfully, he was now the third son of an important noble family. Perfect for a lazy and carefree life. Young master, young master. If only there weren't any obstacles. Dear Lord! Are you sleeping again? Christ! Although he had just woken up from a nap, he closed his eyes again to avoid this situation. It was to appeal for his sleep to not be disturbed. It is already past noon and the sun is starting to set. How are you supposed to sleep at night? If a man tries, he can sleep all day. Almost like a vegetable, although not quite. Being drowsy at day and sleepy at night are two different things. As he made his answer in his mind, he snored loudly. An act to show the butler that he was still in the land of dreams. Time may have taken much from me, but I can still tell between truth and lies. I have been serving you for almost 20 years. You should stop that act of yours and get up. He may have talked like that, but Ian had a way of discerning the truth. At this point, he was just pleading for Riley to get up. Ha! It is almost dinner time. Ian shook Riley's shoulders. Is that so? Riley stood up, unable to resist the sad voice. He didn't want the old man to cry. It seems, you did not train today, either. Riley did not respond to Ian. I am sure you will see your potential, if you would just try. The nagging began. Again. Riley began to doubt whether waking up was the right action. Just, what is the reason? Hey, what do you think today's dinner will be? In terms of wisdom, you would easily surpass both of your brothers. Ian once evaluated Riley to be too mature for his age. In a good way. As a baby, he acted in a way which did not fit his age, due to his old memories. Others may be oblivious, but I know. That young master is lazy. Riley responded with a smile. No. Not at all. Ian's face was dyed red, with steam coming out of his ears. Ha, honestly. Do you know how angry I was at those bastards in Ifa village? Ian closed his eyes, and pounded his chest in anger, only to realize Riley had already distanced himself from him. Ian followed, mumbling foul words as he did. Honestly, Lady Iris. Please discipline Master Riley. He still will not even touch the sword. It is as if he is trying to become a wizard. What's so wrong with that, Ian? Within the second dining room of the mansion, there were 3 people at the table. The woman smiled towards her son who was sitting opposite to her. He. Riley smiled back at his mother when their eyes met. His mother was the only person in the mansion who would understand him. Iris. She would listen attentively at his absurd stories about his dreams. A great mother who truly wished for her son's happiness, despite his lack of effort to learn the swordsmanship of the house. If Riley were to pick his greatest treasure, it would undoubtedly be her. Ha! The same goes for you, my lady. Ian sighed at the two. Oh? What do you mean? Young master is already at the age of 18. He is an adult. How long will you continue to accept his childish behavior? It is time to be a bit more strict with him. And there is also the issue about the successor. Ian pressed his finger between his eyebrows as he said those words. Just remembering about it gave him a headache. Are you not angry? Lady O'Reilly and both her sons would visit you in their spare time, just to ridicule you. Those rude ingrates. Ian, watch your language. We are still in the mansion. No, I will say it. The two of you need some ambition. Do you not want to get back at them? Ian began his complaint. Instead of talking about that weird dream of yours. The dream Riley always spoke of to his mother. When Ian shouted at him that he should be talking about swords instead, Riley replied. Weird dream you say? But it's still interesting, right? Hey? Yeah, it is interesting. Wait, that is not the point. Ian began to appeal to Iris about Riley's good traits. You know how smart young master is the most, my lady. At a young age, Riley was the fastest at learning how to write and speak. That was not the only thing he could say. There were countless more. And Riley's problem-solving skills were beyond his age, and whenever danger would approach, he would disappear from the mansion, using hide-and-seek as an excuse. He would only reappear once the danger had passed. I am still. Iris knew perfectly well just how different Riley was from an average person. The dreams, the way he spoke. Each word and action he took seemed imbued with maturity. His wisdom can be put to use for the sword as well. I have spoken to you before about his unprecedented talent. Ian. Iris cut Ian's words. I am happy as long as Riley is. Even so, she was not bothered by Riley's actions. Because she was his mother, she would only wish for his happiness. Ha! Ian's shoulders drooped as he realized he had failed to convince her again. He felt a little smaller than before, as if all of his muscles underneath had shrunk as well. Ian, it's my life, so I'll take care of it. Riley snickered as he took a mouthful of soup, knowing he escaped Ian's nagging thanks to his mother. Cough. Iris suddenly began coughing. Did her food go down her airway? Was there too much pepper in the soup? Cough, cough. The coughs seemed quite rough. Riley's face began to darken as the coughs did not stop even after some time had passed. Mother. Iris covered her mouth with one hand, while shook the other to tell she was okay. But Riley noticed something on her shaking hands. Mother, your hand. Cough. Cough. Her expression changed for the worse when she looked at her hands. Red blood soaked her hands and dripped down onto the table. Mother. Riley stood anxiously, but quickly turned his head when he noticed someone was watching. At that moment, his eyes changed to that of a predator's, but quickly returned. Who? The laugh was quite distant, but Riley could hear it, and then he saw it. Please wait, I will bring a doctor immediately. Leaving only a laugh of ridicule, the first wife of the Iphelleta family faded into the distance. Young master. Ian stretched his arm towards Riley, who would not say a word. He found it strange that Riley would not turn to look back at his beloved mother, even though she was in such a state. Where are you going? You must sta. As a man who had practiced swordsmanship under the Iphelleta house for his entire life, he could feel a sudden change in Riley's aura. His curiosity rose. It was similar to the time when the first and the second sons of the Iphelleta house ridiculed his mother. Ian thought he could see his potential once more. Ian. Ah, yes. Riley's cold tone made Ian realize just how selfish his thoughts were. It was not the time to try to read the atmosphere or Riley's emotions. Watch my mother. After giving this brief order, Riley immediately left the dining room. Without even looking back towards his mother. There was a reason as to why Riley did not look at his mother despite his love for her. The expression on his face was as cold as stone, filled with anger. His mother may be unconscious, but Riley did not want to show such emotions in front of her. Riley slipped out of the dining room, sped through the corridor and stopped. Oh! Clack, clack! A woman in heels appeared from the corner and confronted Riley with an unsurprised "Oh. Riley? Is that you?" From the vanity of her clothing, to the white face powdered with makeup. With just one look at her luxurious appearance, one would be able to tell that she was someone of importance in the mansion. "Hello." Riley smiled brightly at her while his rage burned within. The woman was the first wife of the house. For Riley, she was another mother to him. Aurelie Iphelleta was her name. "I thought you were having dinner with Iris. You seem to be in a hurry. Do you need something from me?" Aurelie tilted her head, with an innocent look on her face. "Yes, I forgot to greet you earlier." As Riley lowered his head, she waved her hand with a laugh. "Oh, there is no need." Riley looked into her eyes and saw the burning desire within them. Eyes burning with malice and ill intent. An average person may not notice, but Riley had seen such eyes in his previous life. "Lady Aurelie, may I ask? Where did you go just before this?" This smell, it does not seem to be from your dinner. It smells more like that from the kitchen." Aurelie tilted her head once more. "Nice nose you have there." "Yes, I was simply curious as to what the menu is today. I have not yet eaten dinner, you see." "Haha, that does not seem to be like your usual self." "Ho ho, oh you. I could say the same to you, Riley. I'm surprised you are actually on your feet instead of lying around." She stared at Riley with her narrowed eyes. It seemed as if she was looking down on him. Her gaze looked kind at first, but Riley could see the hidden meaning in it. "Move, B*tch. Get out of the way." A fitting phrase he knew from his previous life. It was a warning, telling him to not try anything rash and act like a corpse just as he always had. She must have been quite agitated due to the recent talks about the successor. "Oh Master Lazy Sword, it's good that you are showing such manners, but your mother must be getting worried. Shouldn't you go back?" Aurelie whispered to herself as she turned her back to Riley. "Oh wait, is it the other way around? My bad. Who cares, right?" Riley entered his mother's room, and asked Ian who was looking after her. "How's mother?" "She is all right. For now. She had made it through the worst of it." That thought sank deep in Riley's heart. With an expression as serious as Riley's, Ian put his hand on Riley's shoulder. "Young master, may I have a word with you?" Ian whispered with a grim face. He was wary of the possibility that someone would be eavesdropping. "The truth is, in the soup." Riley cut Ian's words before he could finish. "There was poison, right?" Ian nodded in surprise with cold sweat running down his back. He was wondering how Riley managed to find out, but that was not an important matter. "Yes, the poison is not strong enough to significantly harm a normal person, but Lady Iris is a special case. Her body is already weak from her genetic condition. It must have been a combination of both that caused her to faint." Riley stared at his sleeping mother. It bothered him that he could not do anything but watch his mother fall. Therefore, someone in the mansion tried to assassinate Lady Iris. She is being targeted. We have already captured the maid who was in charge of the dinner. She will be questioned soon. And Ian fixed his tie and bowed to Riley. The action showed Ian's feelings of guilt. "I am sorry." This old man was not aware of this until it was too late. Ian had looked after Riley ever since he was born. He had neglected housework in order to try to convince Riley to train his swordsmanship. The result was Lady Iris's poisoning. If he had been on guard, it would not have happened. Ian was prepared for the punishment. "Ian." "Yes." "About the dream I had, in that strange world. There's a saying like this." "Yes. Don't wake the sleeping lion." Riley spoke while opening and closing his hand. "Where's my wooden sword?" "Young master." Riley continued as he walked out of the bedroom. "I must go to the training room. Today, Riley's eyes burned quietly, as he thought of his mother. In the training grounds of the Iphelleta mansion, within the dark field, a black-haired boy stood. The way he held the wooden sword was a little awkward. Who? The boy sighed while staring at the dummy. It was a dummy filled with straw, without any sort of internal mechanisms. It was purely for novices. Shall I test it? He mumbled to himself as he spread his feet to shoulder width. This stance was quite different from that of his two brothers. After controlling his breathing, he charged toward the dummy, striking it. Hwab! Smack! The strike made a dull noise. A new mark could be seen on the dummy. The mark was very faint, but it was a good strike nonetheless, considering it was his first time swinging the sword. Yet, it was hard to count it as a strike from the Iphelleta house, the house that was said to be blessed by the sword. Young master. Ian, who saw the strike happen, spoke uncertainly. It was severely lacking compared to his expectations. As far as Ian knew, Riley had more than enough talent to cut the dummy's head in a single slash. The situation now looked worse than ever. Please, try again. Ian shook his head and pleaded once more. He thought to himself repeatedly that his eyes did not deceive him. This should do. Riley muttered faintly. He then proceeded to cast away the wooden blade upon the ground. Young master. That's it. I'm bored. Surprised, Ian stretched his arm towards him. Where are you going? The library. I'll just read myself to sleep. Young master. Please, just one more time. Ian bit his lips as his eyes gazed upon the wooden blade lying on the ground. Coo! A warrior throwing his blade away? Ian knew how heavy of a meaning it carried. Although Riley would not have had a clue what it meant. He changes his mind like a girl does changing her clothes. Really? In a room, shrouded in darkness. A woman wearing a white dress turned her head. Behind her was a hooded man, who had his head lowered. Dressed fully in black, he followed her like a shadow. How was his skill? The woman asked while looking out through the moonlit windows. His skill was. The hooded figure paused momentarily. Atrocious. I do not know if these words would fit a man of the Iphelleta house, but his talent for the blade was non-existent. The strike he displayed was a perfect example of a novice. The woman smirked upon hearing the man's report. Well, what did you expect? He is the famous Master Lazy Sword. As she spoke to herself, the man tilted his head as he asked a question. Then are the rumors true? That he has never swung a sword? Yes. It is true. Hey! The man, an assassin hired by the woman, sighed in disbelief. Anyone in the Iphelleta house could become successful by wielding a sword. In that family, he was born a third child, and did nothing. And when he finally changed his mind at the age of 18, he threw away the sword realizing it had little effect. How useless! How pathetic that child is! It didn't seem like he has a weak body either. How shameless! The man stood up while clicking his tongue. His mission here was complete. Mission 1, deliver the poison for the soup. Mission 2, stalk the third son. Those were the missions he was tasked with. Then, I shall take my leave. Yes. Well done. Do send my regards to father. He has been complaining about not being able to see you more often. All right, I'll visit soon. As the woman waved her hand, the hooded man disappeared, as if melting away into the floor. The woman laughed while gazing up at the moon. I was worried for nothing, silly me. Otherworldly smirked. The flames of jealousy in her heart seemed to have calmed down a little. In a corridor of the Iphelleta mansion. After leaving Lady Otherworldly's room, the hooded man sneaked through the corridor in order to avoid being detected by the master of the house. He then turned his head, feeling an intense bloodlust behind him. What was that? He was one of the top 3 within the organization. Even the mansion's master, Count Stein could not avoid being detected by him. If Lady Aurelie was correct, he should still be in his office, in the middle of all the paperwork that needed attending to. The hooded man called upon all of his mana within to detect life in the mansion. As expected, Stein was still in the office. Since his presence was settled there, this bloodlust crawling on his back could not be his. "Who is it?" the man turned and asked. There was no answer. "Am I mistaken?" "No, it can't be." As a veteran in this line of work, there was no way he would mistake such intent. The hooded man lowered his stance and increased his guard. Tension filled the air in the dark corridor. The hooded man, on the edge of his nerves, frowned in frustration. This stabbing sensation of bloodlust was getting closer. Who is this fool? Is he trying to call the Count here too? With such thick killing intent filling the air, not only Stein but even the first and second sons would come running here as well. And they would surely be cut in two. "Oi, if you keep this up, both." The hooded man tried to speak, but held his breath in the next instant. "Ah!" A voice came out from the end of the corridor, breaking the silence. "I thought a rat got inside." Step step. The footsteps started to become louder. A nightly guest. If I recall correctly, there weren't any arrangements for guests to arrive at this hour. There was only one reason why the hooded man held his breath with his eyes wide open. Even though the voice and the footsteps could be heard, the presence could not be detected. Is there another like me? How is it possible, when it seemed mana was not being used at all? The hooded man considered the slim chance that a great senior in his line of work was also stationed in the estate. "It seemed like you came out of Lady Aurelie's room." The man behind the voice showed himself. He sounded rather calm and leisurely. "Why, you are." The moonlight from the windows revealed the man's foot, his clothes, and finally his face. The hooded man's jaw dropped when he realized who it was, stretching the mask covering his face. "Let's have a chat." It was the same man the hooded man could not understand. Riley. His eyes opened wide, unable to believe the scene that was unfolding in front of him. "Why is Lazy Sword?" The black-haired boy in front of him was the same person that he and Lady Aurelie had deemed pathetic. "Really? Didn't you want me to reveal myself?" Riley questioned the hooded man. Riley continued to walk towards him until he was but a breath away from him. "What, were you frightened that much?" The man was armed with a dagger, but Riley remained as calm as ever. In fact, he went so far as to knock on the man's forehead with his right hand, asking him to not just stand there, and speak. It was hard for the man to believe this was the same person who cast away his sword after a single strike in the training ground. Is this really the same Riley? The hooded man did not dare to make even the slightest move. He felt as if any sudden movement would result in his body being sliced into shreds. "This will be boring if you don't have any reaction." Riley continued in his leisurely manner while clicking his tongue. "I guess it's going to be difficult to have an intelligent conversation with such an untimely guest." Riley folded his arms, glanced at the dagger on the man's side, then asked with a cold look. "I'll ask you only once. There'll be no second chance. If you answer, I'll let you go." He had just seen the pathetic strike Riley had made a few moments ago. And now blackmail? What a joke. Yet he could not let out a laugh, instead his entire body just stood motionless. "What I want to know is..." His cold eyes grew narrow. Feeling his heart pounding, the hooded man swallowed his saliva. He was finally allowed to do so. "Why did you visit Lady Aurelie's bedroom?" By the time the hooded man noticed it, his lips began to tremble. The calm moonlight that lit the corridor slowly began to fade away. Late in the evening, Iphelleta Mansion Library. "Young master. Where are you?" "Young master." Ian abruptly entered and looked for signs of Riley. There were traces of an incident here, causing Ian to investigate. "Young master." Riley, who was lying on a couch with a book on his face, groaned and turned his body. "Young master, wake up!" "Ah, what? What's it now?" Riley looked at Ian while rubbing his eyes drowsily. His frown looked as if asking, "Why did you interrupt my sweet nap? If you want to talk about the sword again, I will get back to that later. But that's not important right now." Riley, who was expecting endless lectures from Ian, tilted his head in questioning. "What is it then?" "A body was found in the mansion." "A body? A corpse?" Riley looked at Ian as if he had gone crazy. "What the hell are you on about?" The Riley of now was nothing like how he had been when Iris had collapsed. His eyes had potential when he grabbed the sword, although the result was quite lacking. Ian sighed as he remembered of the expectations he had before. "It is a good thing I made it." When Ian mumbled to himself, Riley's face turned even sourer. "A better explanation please." An unknown man dressed in black was found in front of Lady Aureli's room. "Hey, really?" Riley asked, as if unable to believe it. "It seems like Count Stein has heard of Lady Iris's condition as well. Basically the entire mansion is getting turned upside down. A stranger had managed to sneak into the mansion, and poison had been found in the soup. Although a body was found, it was hard to say whether there was only a single invader. The reason Ian mumbled I made it was because he needed to ensure Riley was safe from the unknown assassins. In any case, it is dangerous for you to be alone." Ian spoke with a bittersweet expression on his face. "I do not believe you could win against an assassin." He hoped that this might stimulate Riley to take action. But... Riley lazily turned his eyes towards the book that was on his face. "I guess it's got nothing to do with me then." "Pardon me. You can go, but I hope you didn't leave my mother alone by any chance." "Why, young master, did you listen to what I said?" "Yeah, I heard it. But it's got nothing to do with me, right?" Riley nodded without even turning his head to Ian. His manner of composure indicated that he was not even the slightest bit concerned from what Ian had just told him. Ian couldn't keep himself from the rising anger resulting from Riley's indifferent attitude. "Just what is?" "Ah, wait." Ian stopped at Riley's remark. "I almost forgot." Riley clicked his finger, then produced something from his pocket. "Here, take these." Riley conferred to Ian a handful of seeds which Ian had never seen before. "These are. Use them to make some tea for mother. It should be pretty effective. Don't lose it, it's quite rare." Riley rolled his shoulder, then pointed to the book he was holding. The title was Encyclopedia of Medicinal Seeds. This was all for Iris, who had collapsed earlier. "When? Just now. I was tired from trying to find these, so I tried to take a nap, and then you came all of a sudden. What do you think I felt like? I'm going back to sleep." Riley went back to the couch as he ordered Ian not to disturb him again. "We have searched every nook and cranny of this estate, even with our senses. He is the only invader." The first son, Ryan, spoke while looking down on the corpse. The second son, Lloyd, followed the conversation. "To invade on his own, and without a weapon as well, he must have underestimated us quite a bit." Count Stein, who had been listening to his sons, scanned the area for any evidence. He thought of another possibility. "On the contrary, perhaps there's another accomplice within the mansion." The body was located right in front of Lady Aureli's room, so she had no choice but put on an act of detective work. "Impossible." She looked pale with worry, as if asking what's going on, but what her mind was going through was the complete opposite. The assassin she had called in secret has been killed instead, and placed in front of her room. It was no trifling matter. From the way he is dressed, he is likely a thief or someone from the assassin guild. Should we start from there? Of course. Search the entirety of the lands, starting from Ifa village. How dare they challenge us by setting a foot into the Iphelleta mansion? Count Stein grinned his teeth and swore to catch the person responsible for this. Just how did this? Lady Aurelie gulped in fear. While she was afraid of her temperamental husband, the worst thing was that something was missing from the body. A dagger with the guild seal on it. The dagger which should have been on his waist had disappeared into thin air. Who? It would have been convenient if the evidence was destroyed by the assassin himself, but there was little chance that happened considering how his corpse looked. Then who? Just who could have taken the dagger? Morning, at Count Stein's office. So, Riley had a go with the sword. Yes. Ian reported to Stein what had happened yesterday. Yesterday, Riley had gone to the training grounds after watching his mother collapse. Ian added that the lazy atmosphere that usually surrounded Riley had vanished for a moment. Well, he did have a go, but although it was good news that the lazy child displayed potential to some extent, there was an additional piece of information that would counteract the former, with room to spare. He lost interest immediately. I assume he was disappointed with the power of his swing. That meant that his swordsmanship was beyond pathetic. Stein, who had been tapping on his desk, nodded. All right. You may leave. Master, perhaps you should give. I'm already having a headache with the rat that infiltrated the manor. I had already surmised that Riley would only amount to that. There is no reason to teach the swordsmanship of the Iphelleta house to someone who lacks any form of motivation. I'm sure my ancestors would think the same. After finishing his words, Stein flicked his hand to shoo Ian away. Ian turned to leave with his head lowered ruefully. Riley managed to find the perfect angle to lie down on his preferred apple tree. This was the sort of angle he found only once a fortnight. If he were to move now, it would be lost for the rest of the day. Therefore, Riley would not move from where he was. I wonder if that will fall anytime soon. He had been licking his lips while staring at the apple which had been dangling on the tree. For a while now, he had been waiting for it to fall on its own. Perhaps by the wind. Perhaps due to a worm. Or perhaps a bird would land on it. He was waiting in anticipation for the single apple directly above his head to fall to him. Were he to stand and take it himself, he would be forced to relinquish his perfect position. Ha! Young master! Riley, who had been counting the number of leaves around the apple, turned his attention away. The words that came from behind were equivalent to sighs of dismay. Naturally, the man who spoke those words was a dejected Ian. What's up? You seem pretty down. Riley shifted his eyes to glance at Ian. Ah. I see. Is it raining today? Your back and knees must be aching. Ian began to give Riley a glare. Right. Riley scratched his head and looked up at the sky. The sky was blue, with not a cloud in sight. Was I wrong? Young master! Ian suddenly shouted at Riley. Geez, you surprised me. Riley almost flinched out of his perfect position. Will you really give up after that? What about it? Riley replied as if asking what the problem was. Ian continued speaking with his hands curled into fists. I will give you praise for finding those seeds for Lady Iris. She has recovered considerably thanks to them. Of course. They were no ordinary seeds. Riley had placed special enchantment on the seeds. But, to give up after only one swing. That's... Ian's words began to falter. As the first man to have had seen Riley's potential, he was also the one to be the most devastated by his lack of motivation. He wondered if his lifespan had shortened from watching so much potential wither away. Or perhaps it had given him cancer. Well, if I can't win with a sword, I'll just become a mage. I like reading better anyway. At least cancer could be cured, with some luck. Ian screamed in frustration. What, you think becoming a mage is? Is that easy? Just when he was about to ask, Riley turned his gaze elsewhere. It was directed above him, between the leaves of the apple tree. What are you looking at? An apple. Why? I thought if I became a mage, I could take that apple without standing. Young master. Riley shut his mouth. Overwhelmed by Ian, Riley muttered after building up his courage. Your shouting is hurting my ears. Don't change the subject. This time, I'll surely change your... Wait, Ian. Look, over there. Is that the glint of a blade? What are you on? Ian told himself that he would call Lady Iris as reinforcements if Riley was misleading him again, and then he looked up. But what was this? Just as Riley had said, a blade could be seen within the leaves. It was not a long sword or a double-edged sword like the ones used in the house. It was a dagger. One without a sheath. A dagger. Ian was quite interested by the peculiar purple grip it had, and jumped toward it. As he landed on the branches, he carefully took the dagger out from the tree. It seems familiar. It was a dagger with a crescent-shaped blade. Ian widened his eyes in realization. Wait. Is this? The shape of the blade would fit perfectly in the sheath that was currently in Stein's office. What? What's going on? Show me as well. Riley did not want to move, but he was curious, too. Therefore, he took the option of ordering Ian. Ian dropped next to Riley and handed the dagger to him. I believe this belonged to the dead man we found yesterday. Hey? How do you know? The shape is identical to the sheath he had. We should be able to find out soon. Ian took the dagger back from Riley. Then I shall go to see Master Stein. Hey? All right then. Riley nodded in agreement as Ian spoke with a serious face. He got to skip out on all the nagging, and there was nothing he was missing out on. As Ian left in a hurry, Riley began to tap the tree with his foot. Well then. Riley talked to himself. Although his eyes still looked as lazy as ever, the atmosphere around him changed completely. How are they going to react? Riley closed his eyes and spread his senses far and wide across the mansion, keeping his own presence concealed. Number 3 is dead. Yes, sir. Inside a dark room. The candle suspended from the ceiling burned faintly. This was the hideout from which the hooded man originated. How did he die? A man who was dressed differently from the other hooded men asked for a report. As expected of an experienced assassin, the reply came in a dry manner. We have no idea. It would mean that death of number 3 was not a suicide. And the body? He bit his lip and asked another question. It is being held in the Iphelleta house. Hey! The situation was bad. It had happened in the famous Iphelleta house. If any evidence was found from the body, not just the hideout but the lives of everyone in that room would be in danger. O'Reilly's in a bad position. He scratched his beard as he thought about his daughter. What will you do? As the hooded man asked, the man stood up from his chair. I will go. Directly. Well, we mustn't be found out. We leave this evening. Make preparations for a stealth mission. As you wish. The hooded man bowed and disappeared. Well then. Standing alone in the room, the man grabbed a mask from the table, and placed it in his pocket. It's been a while since I last paid a visit to my son-in-law. It was a dire situation. News had just arrived, mentioning that the butler Ian had shown the dagger to Count Stein. It was originally thought that the issue of assassin's dagger had been taken care of, as it was nowhere to be found on the body. But, that was clearly not the case. The job must be completed, by today at the very latest, just to be safe. Lady O'Reilly, First Lady of Iphelleta House. Though it was not known to the world, her father was the head the Assassin Guild in secret. If one were to mention the problem at hand, then it would be the fact that the Iphelleta house despised such people, and O'Reilly was now at risk of having her family's secret exposed. What if this information were to be found out? Then, the situation would get ugly. The marriage between O'Reilly and Stein was purely for business purposes. If, If they find out the poison for Iris was from me. Aurelie gulped audibly. If word of this got out, then her fragile relationship maintained by her two sons would shatter completely. She did not want to lose the man, Stein. Definitely not to his concubine. That was what she was most afraid of, rather than her secret being exposed. No, that cannot happen. Mother. The second son of the house, Lloyd, was shaking her shoulders. What is it? We were talking about Riley. Are you all right, Mother? There was worry shown on his face. Perhaps it was due to his mother not looking too well. No. I am doing fine. You seem quite sick. It might be due to lack of sleep. What happened yesterday was simply too much for me. Aurelie lied as if she weren't aware of what was going on. She hadn't revealed even to her sons that the body in front of her room was related to her. Even in death, he brings such harm to us. Of all places, to die in front of your room. Lloyd grumbled. Have some rest, Mother. I will stay by your side. How could she tell him that she is the daughter of a cruel assassin? Impossible. No, there's no need. I'm more interested in our previous conversation. It was about Riley, right? Aurelie smiled back at her worried son. Ah, yes. Lloyd nodded. Apparently, Riley had a go with a sword yesterday. Oh, Riley did. It was before the body was found. Lloyd scratched the back of his head. Well. It was probably because of the poisoning that happened to Lady Iris. That seemed to be the reason. I guess the lazy child became quite enraged that time. Haha. So? How was it? The edges of Aurelie's eyes twitched, albeit faintly. She was already well aware of the story, told to her yesterday by the hooded man. But, hearing it from her son had a different feel to it. It was abysmal. This time, she had a faint smile on her lips. Oh, is that so? This was it. The proof that she was superior to the concubine Iris, that she should be the one who received the most love. Iris's son was a pathetic, useless plebeian, while Aurelie's sons were both able swordsmen. This alone was enough to prove her presence in the house. Ho ho, that's how it is. Aurelie's eyes turned towards the windows. Outside, she could see Riley sleeping on the apple tree in the garden. It was as if the thought of learning swordsmanship was out of question. Late afternoon in Ifa village. For some reason, there were multiple carriages lined up within the village. They all looked quite luxurious. What is it? Why is the mithril carriage of the Tez Trade Guild here in the village? A villager asked, pointing towards the shiniest of all the carriages. Who knows? Did they find a gold mine nearby? As if it's a gold mine. If they actually did find one, I'll give you my wife. How come the bet seems favorable to you? It didn't seem like any of the villagers knew the reason. All of them had curious looks. It was one of the biggest trade guilds on the continent. The fact that the personal carriage of the guild's head was here was a big deal for the villagers. It's just a rumor, but it concerns the wife of the Iphelleta house. Remembering a rumor, some of the villagers began whispering among themselves, with their hands covering their mouths. What was her name, the first wife? Ah. Lady Aurelie. Apparently, she is the guild head's daughter. What? That's the first time I've heard of this. Hey, think about it. Why would Count Stein agree to wear a ring for the not-so-pretty Lady Aurelie? He would seem to be on the losing end, no. The villager who had been talking about Lady Aurelie used his hands to create a round shape with his thumb and index finger. This must have been going back and forth. Wow! The villagers made sounds of shock when they heard those words. As they did, the members of the trade guild turned their heads toward the villagers. SHH, watch your mouths. Even when they were quiet, they could still hear them. With the Tez traders glaring at them, the villagers quickly left the area with their mouths covered. Then, why is the mithril carriage all the way over here? Well? Maybe he wants to see his daughter. The two villagers continued to gossip as soon as they left the site of the traders. Then he could just go straight to the mansion. Why stop at the village? It wouldn't even take 30 minutes to go by the carriage. Iphelleta is quite the difficult house to meet, you know. Even the highest nobles would need to arrange a time to meet them. Ah, I see. They probably sent a messenger to the mansion to warn them in advance while they stopped the carriage here. The two villagers who had been talking about Otherworldly and the Iphelleta house could not sense the bloodthirsty looks which were directed at them. That dream again. Riley sighed as he woke up from his long nap, that had lasted up until the sunset. He was in a bad mood. There were 3 reasons for this. First, his perfect angle was lost. Second, it was that dream of his previous life. Third. Number 2 first, then 4 and 5 next. Make no mistake. He could hear unfamiliar voices in his head. It was the reason why he woke up. Tisk. It's not what I wanted. Riley mumbled with a frown. What he expected was that the dagger Ian had shown to Stein would act as a significant piece of evidence, which would prevent the culprits from taking further action in the mansion. Basically it was to prevent any more incidents from happening, but it didn't seem to work as he planned. Well, it was a 50/50th chance anyway. Riley stood up and patted off the dust that was on his pants. Are you ready? Mental message, Jeonum. It was a skill that allowed the caster to intercept conversations between people. He could listen in on whatever he wanted to hear. First, make sure that the tools are all ready by the time I get inside. We have to get the job done faster than ever before. These words that were tickling Riley's ears could only be transmitted by those who can control mana, like a messenger. We have a single objective, to retrieve No 3's body. Only one voice could be heard. Most likely the leader of the mansion's invaders. Try not to get detected by the servants in the mansion. Not even by the maids or butlers. They were all warriors before working here. Tisk. Riley clicked his tongue again. It seemed that the leader was quite familiar with the Iphelleta house. Then, let's begin. Wait, before that. Just before their mission started, Riley joined in. Using mental message, a skill that required using significant amount of mana. Silence fell. Only the shaking of the leaves could be heard in the air. Even as Riley was thinking about what to say, the other was not sending any messages back. Most likely being on guard, realizing that all his messages were being intercepted. I just have one thing to say. I don't care what you do in the mansion. Just don't make the situation where I have to act. Consider this a warning. There was no reply, but the mental message was definitely sent. There was a change in the atmosphere after Riley's warning. Don't. Riley stepped forward as he continued. Annoy me. He walked towards Iris's room. Well, let's just respect each other's personal space. Although Riley wasn't sure if they knew what he meant by personal space, he meant to convey that they should simply respect each other and just move on. The hooded men who snuck into the Iphelleta house. None of them could move a muscle any longer. This was due to the mysterious stranger who just spoke to them. Just then. It was more than enough to shock them when the stranger managed to detect, listen in and intercept their mental messages. How? Not to mention he had managed to send the message to every single one, who were all hidden meticulously. It was understandable that all of them were stunned. And where? The leader of the hooded men, Tez quickly turned his eyes around. No matter where he looked, he couldn't find the mental message's point of origin. Which meant there was a clear difference in ability between them and the stranger. The Iphelleta house had someone who could hide his presence this well. As far as Tez knew, the Iphelleta house did not consider assassins as equals. In fact, the house was a congregation of people who despised and wouldn't hesitate to get rid of them if they ever saw one. It's as if. Tez gulped nervously. Considering the skill of the mental message, the stranger was at least as skilled and powerful as himself. It was not easy to remove such a powerful presence. But, he couldn't sense him at all. I'm seeing a ghost. Presence, or mana. Or anything else. Along with such power, there are distinct features which get left behind. They can be used to distinguish them immediately from the rest. But even those features could not be found, as if it really was a ghost. This was a feat only the most skilled assassins could accomplish. Tisk. Underneath the mask, Tez frowned. He did not like it. The situation he was in. The fact that his daughter was cornered, that he flinched because of some random stranger. I don't know whose joke this is, but there must be something holding him back if he decides to hide like this. Otherwise there is no reason for him to remain in the shadows. If he wanted to continue threatening them, he should have kept sending that killing intent at them. That's what Tez believed. Don't annoy me. Tez clutched his dagger as he remembered those words. He had no intention of annoying him. In fact, he hated such situations. All he needed was his colleague's body and the dagger. Quietly. Then, all their business in the house would be done. We are moving. He had come all the way here to help his troubled daughter. They had to move now, otherwise the mission would become impossible to complete before they even began. The warning from the previous mental message hadn't repeated since then. There was no time to waste. I will go to the son's office where the dagger is. Tez jumped out of the bush he was hiding in. As he slipped into the mansion like the wind, his subordinates gained heart and followed behind him. The hooded figures began slipping into nooks and crannies of the mansion like rats. Number 2 to 10 will take the body. Tez ordered using mental message. The rest will make some noise to gain the mansion's attention. If in danger, remove all evidence through suicide. Bang! As soon as his second order was given, an explosion occurred somewhere in the mansion. It seemed the fight had already begun. You sons of B*****. The old man shouted. He was wearing butler's clothes and held a straight sword in one hand. It was a normal sword, but it was made of good steel and boasted superior hardness. The old man swung his blade. Yug. Kyug. How could a man well into his 50s have so much strength? With but a single strike 2 hooded men were knocked back. Where do you think this is? The old man swung at them once more. The blade suddenly glowed blue and showed its power despite the gap between them. The aura blade. The blue light was shot from the blade and cut through the hooded men along with their daggers. Were they just grunts? The old man shook his arm and turned around. Ian Nim. Sira. Sira. She was one of the maids serving in the mansion. It seemed the chat of reunion will be cut short, as the sword she held also had blood on it. I will take care of Lady Iris's room. Ian Nim should go protect young master. It meant to find and bring Riley back from the garden. Ian understood and nodded in agreement. He moved immediately. All right, don't push yourself. I'll be right back. It would only take 10 seconds for Ian to reach the gardens from Lady Iris's room. If there weren't any obstacles. Young master, please. Riley would often play hide and seek in times of danger. Ian ran through the corridor, praying that Riley would once again show that ability and get himself to safety. Please be safe. 1 second. 5 seconds. 7 seconds in, Ian met with an obstacle. Tisk. Ian's facial expression crumbled. From his presence, one could tell this was not your run-of-the-mill fighter. It would likely take some time. Time that could determine Riley's life or death at any moment. This wasn't what Ian wanted. I do not like to run my mouth too much, but I'll let you live if you leave now. Ian threatened the hooded man. His sword glowing blue with killing intent. Even so, the hooded man stayed silent. He simply tucked his chin, and pulled his dagger. He didn't know Ian's intention, but he wasn't letting him pass. "You bastard!" Judging by the reaction of his eyes, the hooded man was not deaf. Ian ground his teeth in anger as the man ignored his warning. "I have no time." Ian stopped mid-sentence and charged toward the man, and the sword and dagger met. Bang! Sparks flew and Ian's arm engaged with the hooded man's. "To play with you!" Ian shouted as he twisted his body. Just when some distance was made between them, Ian's and the hooded man's weapons swung at different angles, aiming for each other's lives. Coup! Was it due to the fact that the two blades imbued with mana clashed? The two mana blades' trajectories faded slowly. Afterwards, Ian's shoes could be heard sliding on the carpet. "Fuck!" Ian swore as he was pushed back. The match was a draw. In strength, of all things. What power from such an old man! The same was the case for the hooded man. He was just as surprised as Ian. As one of the 5 strongest people in the guild, he didn't expect to be pushed back like this. Thankfully the mask was hiding his emotions right now. "Move you lil b *tch. Ian had been watching his tongue since he began working as a butler, but his habit from his mercenary days was starting to show. "Move it, no move your mute ass out of here. Just fuck off." At this point he was swearing like in the old days. His face turned red like the face of a demon. That's how desperate he was. Any more time wasted, and there was no telling what might happen to Riley. "I can't let this man pass." The hooded man cracked his wrist, which was still shaking from the strike before, and fixed his stance. He believed this old man was nothing short of extraordinary. That asshole! Ian tucked his chin in. If he could kill a man by glaring, the hooded man would have died 100 times over. Sadly, he didn't have such powers. The hooded man was quite the adversary. "Young master! Wait for me, just hold on a little longer." Ian ground his teeth. "These old bones will come and get you." How many minutes had passed? 1 minute? 3 minutes? Perhaps even 10 minutes had passed. Yet the duel didn't seem anywhere close to concluding. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Veins began to show on Ian's forehead, along with a film of sweat covering his whole face. His old body had reached its physical limit from the prolonged, intense combat. "I can't waste any more time." It was for Riley's safety. And considering his condition, allowing the fight to drag on any longer would be dangerous. The next strike. "I'll finish it with the next strike." Ian tightened his grip on his sword. He was preparing himself for a perilous gamble. If he lost, his life might be at risk, but there was no other choice. No risk, no reward. Ian focused his gaze and dashed forward with a different stance than before. The hooded man noticed Ian's desperation, and reacted without any hesitation. Kug. In the end, Ian's decision turned out to be a mistake. The enemy had already anticipated that move. Ian's sword parted the empty air, and the hooded man managed to slip through his defenses and attack from behind. Fuck! Would this be where his life ended? Ian's sweat dripped in the air. At that moment, Ian felt as if the world had stopped. Perhaps it was a flashback? Ian's brain acknowledged his upcoming demise and began to show his past. The days working as a mercenary. Retiring and working in the Iphelleta house. Meeting Riley. It was a life rife with danger and excitement. "Young master, forgive me." Ian apologized, for he would die before fulfilling his duty to Riley. Ian had given up on his life. Whoosh! A dagger flew from an unknown corner and drove itself into the hooded man's shoulder. Kook! The hooded man was startled. That dagger just now belonged to his comrade. Was there a traitor? Then who? Even before that. How could a third party who could neither be seen nor detected manage to hit him with a dagger? That was something even his superior could not do. An opening. Ian did not miss the brief moment, and his eyes glinted with hope. The deciding factor between a winner and a loser was paper-thin difference when it came to a duel between two masters. That moment changed the flow of combat. Ugh! Instantly, Ian's sword sliced the hooded man's neck. The hooded man clutched his throat. Blood spilled between his fingers, and he fell on his knees. Then his chest slammed onto the ground lifeless. Huck! Who? Ian, who had just escaped certain death, began to rein in his wild breathing. He wasn't sure what had just occurred, but all that mattered was the objective that remained. He had no time right now to think about the duel that had just taken place. Young master! Ian ran through the corridor, driven by his worry for his lazy master. HHMMMM. A murmur could be heard from the corridor. Riley was the one who made the uttering. That's odd. Riley looked down at his hand, with which he had just thrown something with full strength. The result wasn't what he had expected. Why did it miss? A knife throw. That is what it would be called in normal circumstances, but what Riley had just performed was nothing short of a miracle. I was going for his heart. Riley's blade throw had ricocheted from the wall. Twice. He had calculated the angle for the throw so only the handle would hit the wall. After that, it had indeed landed on his target, but not where he had wanted it. This was why Riley was not satisfied with the result. I guess that's to be expected. The knife throw was his most used skill back in his previous life. Although blessed with the sword, he lacked talent for any skills with range such as archery or magic. Therefore, this was one of his compromises to deal with such a disadvantage. This body is different from before, and quite a lot of time has passed. Riley stretched his hands open and closed as he spoke to himself. If an average person had heard it, they would lose consciousness on the spot. There was a possibility of friendly fire if he were to miss, not even to mention the distance between him and the target. Yet, Riley was confident that he would never hit Ian, who was in combat, and that it would only hit the hooded man. That was backed up by skill and experience equivalent to his confidence. Although it was all gained in his previous life. Well, it was a dagger as well. Riley gazed under him. The previous owner of the dagger and his companions were all on the ground with their mouths agape. They were all dead. Whoops, too many useless thoughts. Riley rubbed his shoes on the carpet to remove the blood stains from them, realizing that Ian may enter at any moment if he were to stay idle. It was to get rid of the proof. If anyone from the mansion were to see Riley standing atop the corpses of assassins, or find any proof of his corresponding actions, his leisurely life would end at that moment. That's not what Riley wanted. Ahem, ahem. Riley cleared his throat to clear the atmosphere and quickly left the area. Ian. Why, young master? At this moment, Ian remembered why the word reassurance existed. It was all thanks to the boy who was rounding the corner. How thankful he was to meet the master who had irritated him so much before. What's going on? You're sweating quite a bit. Young master. What? Did you go for a run? No, it's nothing. Riley asked with a smirk, and Ian shook his head with tears in his eyes. Riley tilted his head in reaction to the old man's face of salvation. It were as if he didn't know anything. Where have you been? Weren't you at the gardens before? About that. Riley flinched at the unexpected question, but Ian showed no signs of noticing it. I was in the bathroom, but why? Is something happening? Riley asked as if worried about the sweat-covered Ian. Ian answered with a serious look on his face. The assassins have invaded the mansion. Assassins? As Riley acted surprised, Ian nodded his head. Yes. It must be about that incident before. It concerned that situation that had taken place previously. The discovery of the body of an assassin must have been the reason they had come to the mansion. The situation now is different from before. This time, staying alone is really dangerous. This is not a joke. I am dead serious. Riley started to look around the area as if unable to believe it. The mansion seemed too quiet, but there were occasional sword clashes that could be heard from afar. It was the proof that Ian was speaking the truth. What in God's name is happening? As Riley swallowed his spit, he quickly turned his head and asked Ian. Ian, what about Mother? Is she all right? That was the first thing he was worried about. The rumor about his laziness might have been widespread, but his love for his mother was second to none. Ian's face relaxed at the boy's concern. Sira is defending her. It should be all right, since she's quite the energetic one. Is that so? Ha, that's good. Riley made a sigh of relief. We should reconvene with Sira now. Ian spoke after observing the corridors. The bloodthirst in the mansion was getting thicker. It was likely that Stein had finally entered combat. Both Ryan and Lloyd must have been making use of their blades as well. Right now, we are the most vulnerable party in the entire mansion. Riley was the weakest within the Iphelleta house. But that's why he had to be protected. To protect the seed that had not yet sprouted. One that he would watch the moment it bloomed with both his eyes. As Ian steadied his resolve, he looked kindly towards Riley. I'll take the lead. Make sure you stay right behind me, since we don't know what's going to happen. Ian, wait. As Ian was about to move with his sword unsheathed, Riley raised his hand to stop him. Now that I think about it, I saw something weird in the toilet. Something weird. Maybe it's connected to the invaders in the mansion. Ian turned curious after hearing those words from the boy. Ian had looked after Riley since he was an infant. Maybe he was pointing to something special, just like his previous hide and seek. That thought crossed his mind. I brought it with me just in case. Riley's hand moved to his right pocket. Just what had the boy discovered? As Ian tried to speculate what it could be, the object was revealed. Young master, that is. Ian's brows furrowed after laying his sights on the object in question. That what Riley had found? They were pieces of ripped paper which had been put together. Ian looked dumbfounded at the paper, and spoke. Young master. Yet. Riley answered seriously. Why are you presenting me used toilet paper? What? Riley held tightly onto the paper as his eyebrows furrowed for a moment. His aggrieved face looked as if there was a misunderstanding. No, that's not it. Who does he think I am? In order to clear the misunderstanding, Riley sent a sharp glare as he stretched his clenched fist forward. As Riley moved his chin about, Ian put his hand forward with his lips shriveled. Riley opened his hand and its contents fell onto Ian's. Check it. Ian, who had been examining the paper observantly, carefully opened it. Thankfully, no brown stains could be found on it. Phew. As Ian made a sigh of relief, Riley's eyes squinted once more. Ian's eyes looked closely at the paper, and found something. There were some words written on the paper. But what's this? The handwriting was quite familiar to Ian. This handwriting? Can you tell? As the paper was ripped, there was no way to figure out everything that was written on the original, but it did contain a certain ingredient. No, impossible. This familiar handwriting, coupled with the ingredient which was most likely put into the soup recently. Only one person came into mind from taking these two facts into account. If you were to grab any bystander, and ask who was the strongest combatant in the Iphelleta house, 9 out of 10 people would say it was the master of the house, Count Stein. I've got to admit, you're a sly rat. Surprisingly, a lone hooded man could last against him for quite a long time. Naturally, it was Tez. He was the chief of all the invading hooded men. Whenever Stein's mana blade was discharged, he would dodge it by a hair's breadth and simply harass him back from a distance. As expected of my son-in-law. If this were a close-quarters combat situation, Tez would most definitely lose. There's no way I can beat my son-in-law. It was obvious who the winner was in terms of skill, but Tez's objective was not Stein's head. Were he seriously trying to take Stein's life, he would much rather ambush him or poison his food rather than brazenly fight him out in the open. Taking such a differing approach was the assassin's way, and much more effective. His objective now was simply to buy time. While his subordinates retrieved their comrade's corpse located somewhere in the mansion, he would keep the strongest swordsman, Count Stein, at bay. We've got the dagger. Now we just wait for them to retrieve the body. Tez spun his wrist around to ease the ache as he created distance from Stein's powerful lunge. If things were according to his expectations, he just had to withstand this for another 2 minutes and he would win objectively. Tisk. Stein clicked his tongue at the hooded man's agile evasive maneuvers. He figured out what his opponent was aiming for. Are you trying to buy time? Tez did not reply. As he hadn't changed his voice, he might be found out if he were to reply. As the master of the Tez Trade Guild, he had seen him once when he was younger. His daughter's wedding had been their second meeting. Although he had only seen him twice in his life, Stein would most likely remember his voice. He had to be careful because he was still his father-in-law. Right now he wasn't acting as the master of the Tez Trade Guild, but as the chief of the Assassin Guild. It seems I've been underestimated. The situation didn't seem like it was getting any better. Stein's sword simply could not touch his opponent. Stein spoke with his brows furrowed, as if irritated. I can tell that you lack the skills to kill me. A pathetic man who is skilled only in fleeing. Therefore, Stein changed his mind. His objective went from the man's capture, to his death. Sheet. Tez felt cold sweat dripping from his face as he realized the situation had suddenly changed for the worse, and put all his nerves on high alert. A moment of carelessness would be the end of him. One bad move and I might actually die now. Although it won't be long, let's buy some more time. As Tez made such a decision, he was about to use the smoke screen device hanging on his waist when... Tez flinched as he heard the anxious footsteps coming from behind the door. None of his subordinates would make such noise. That meant that the owner of those footsteps would be... Master. Bang. The man who came barging through the door was an old man in the garbs of a butler. His face was covered in sweat, as if he came while hurrying. Ian. Why was Ian here, when Stein thought he was protecting Riley at his side? As Stein was getting worried, his eyes glanced behind Ian. There was another familiar face accompanying him. Ian wasn't the only person who came to Stein's office. Although it didn't seem intended, there was one more visitor. Ian? What are you doing? Wearing a dress, her pride on full display. Her orange hair was tied to the back. Lady O'Reilly was the second visitor. It seemed as though she was forced to come, as she tried to escape Ian's grasp. She seemed desperate to run away from here, unable to hide her look of inconvenience. Master, Lady O'Reilly. Lady O'Reilly. Stein took a glimpse at the hooded man after hearing those words, then put his sword down. As if even more surprised than him, the hooded man stood there like stone, losing all will to fight. Riley. Are you okay? You're not hurt, are you? Yes, don't worry. Dear Lord, what a disaster this is. After coming to Iris's room, Riley sent Ian to Lady O'Reilly, and proceeded to hug his mother to prove his well-being. Currently, the maid Sira was watching pleasantly at the reunion from the sidelines as she guarded them. Thankfully, no assassins came to this room. Sira. Riley slowly turned his head towards Sira after the hug. Yes, young master. Sira quickly came back to reality and bowed her head. Although she had thought that Riley looked entertained for a moment, she quickly dismissed the thought. Do you have any popcorn? Hey. Popcorn. Popcorn. Popcorn? Sira tilted her head, unable to understand the question. Do they not have any of that here? Riley scratched his head realizing his mistake, when Iris asked. Riley, what is popcorn? Ah, that's... Realizing that the snack he had enjoyed back in his previous life wasn't here, he thought of how to avoid the question, then gave up and began to explain. It's something like a snack. You make it with some corn and butter. A snack. A snack when assassins had invaded the mansion? There was a limit to being so carefree. Syrah made an empty look as her shoulders drooped. What I heard from Ian Nim was just the tip of the iceberg. Syrah, who had heard complaint after complaint from Ian, finally felt as if she could understand his feelings a little and made a bitter smile. Riley. A snack isn't bad, but, do you have to eat it now? Even Iris, who would always reply with a smile to anything related with Riley, didn't seem like she would let this one go. Therefore, her face turned serious as she prepared to scold her son. Hey! As Syrah's and Iris's eyes turned toward him, Riley finally showed some sign of worry and quickly made some excuse. But, there's going to be some entertainment soon. I'd like to eat something with it. Hey! What did you say? Unable to hear the small voice, Syrah and Iris asked for him to repeat himself. Riley smiled awkwardly. Ah, no. It's nothing. I'm sorry. I'll think about what I've done. I'm sorry, Syrah. Bothering you like this. With a quick apology from Riley, Iris, who was ready to scold him, and Syrah, who was confused, looked at each other. But, Syrah. There's some corn in the kitchen, right? Syrah's jaw dropped. She could finally understand. A little, no, a lot. She could finally understand Ian's feeling. Ah, he's here. How many minutes had passed? Ian dragged his exhausted body back to Iris's bedroom. Riley, who had been sitting in a leisurely manner until now, stood up to greet him, as if he had been waiting for a while. How was it? Riley asked Ian, who looked as if he could not believe what had happened. As if he was out of his mind, Ian could not muster a reply. Both Iris and Syrah, who did not know what the boy was asking about, could only tilt their heads with puzzled looks on their faces. Ian Nim, where have you been? You left so quickly after returning with young master. Ian, are you all right? You don't look too well. Well, that's... How should he explain? Ian continued to open and close his mouth repeatedly, until he finally managed to make a sound. It was Lady Aurelie. Pardon. What? It was all Lady Aurelie's doing. Ian covered his frowning face with his hands and continued to explain. He did so while mentioning to himself that he simply could not believe what he had just seen. The poison which was put inside Lady Iris's soup. Hey! There was only one conclusion one could arrive at after hearing this and the words that were cut off from before. Lady Aurelie, she was the one who had poisoned Lady Iris's dinner. Ian, who had said those words. Iris, who had heard those words. Both stood as silent as statues. This was a matter that would turn the mansion upside down. It can't be, right? Lady Iris. Ian, surely, Lady Aurelie would never. Iris, who was tucked in her bed, firmly held onto the edge of the blanket. Even if she had often received scoldings from Lady Aurelie, as a woman who shared the same husband, Iris believed she would be the last person to be responsible for it, and thus she pressured Ian once more. Mother, it's all right. Riley held onto his mother's shoulder. She calmed down, stopped questioning Ian and bit her lip. Ian. Riley called his butler. Ian nodded with his jaws clenched at the call of his master. The serious face he was making was to show nothing he had said was false. Impossible. Iris's shoulders drooped at the shocking news. At the same time, Syrah's jaw dropped. Lady Aurelie's jealousy and hatred toward Lady Iris was something all the maids in the mansion knew, but they never expected that it was significant enough to attempt an assassination. What about father? Riley asked Ian with a calm attitude, as if he had expected it. Since he was the first one to find out the truth himself. He is currently holding a discussion. Ian replied in weary voice. It had been a long time since he had last fought. And with such shocking news on top, even the most experienced swordsman would be tired both physically and mentally. It was the paper. Master Riley found certain pieces of paper in the mansion end. Ian leaned onto the door and continued speaking. It all started with the scraps of paper Riley had found. The handwriting on the paper was Lady Aureli's. So, after reading it. No. The letter made a request for poison which could be used against Lady Iris. And. Wait, Ian Nim. Sierra cut Ian's words. The cold sweat appearing on her face showed just how nervous she was. She could guess. What would come after that was something much worse than mere poison. That was her expectation. It's a lie, right? Ian fell silent. The atmosphere in this place was as chilly as a wintry night. Why? Stein asked after looking blankly at the paper in his hand. Aureli could not answer. Why did you poison Iris's soup? Count Stein asked once more, his tone condemning. The question was not directed to Aureli this time, but rather to the hooded man. The second question was also met with silence. Although the hooded man's face was still hidden, considering both he and Aureli were standing close together, they seemed to be on friendly terms with each other. I don't think there would be any reason for such an action. As there was no answer, Aureli clenched her fists. She seemed furious. Aureli. Finally, the hooded man spoke, with a voice fraught with worry. Stein scowled as the voice seemed familiar. This voice. Your. Realizing his cover was blown, the hooded man raised his hands. The black cloth covering his face fell back slowly. A face which Stein knew all too well appeared. The man who was the master of Tez Trade Guild, and his father-in-law. Father. Stein's face that had been regaining calmness twisted once more. He felt betrayed. By the famous Tez Trade Guild. By his family. Ha! That they were intimately close with the much despised Assassin Guild. That he was not aware of those facts. I feel like a fool. A fool. A wavering voice replied after the word fool. Aureli, who had been silent until now, opened her mouth. I'm the one who feels like a fool, me. Stein's cold stare turned to Aureli. Aureli slowly raised her head with tears in her eyes and looked back at Stein. Her face displayed an aggrieved emotion as if she didn't deserve any of this. If you had looked at me just once, after the wedding. Was there ever a time when you gazed at me with love? She began to make a deluge of complaints. It was as if a dam was bursting out. She spoke with her fists close to her chest, trembling harder than her voice. Not just me, but Ryan and Lloyd too. Have you ever been nice to your two sons? Stein did not reply. He continued to look at Aureli, his gaze unchanged. What wrong did they do to deserve it? What did I do wrong? Compared to that useless Riley, that B*tch Iris. I am much more. Aureli began to frantically gasp for air, as she had run out of breath, then added that it wasn't over. I got everything I wanted. I could get everything I wanted. I will get everything I want. So. Aureli's eyes began to shake. Her original message disappeared, replaced by something hideous within that had been building up since she was young. As the daughter of the famous Tez Trade Guild, she got everything she wanted, and did everything she wanted. The ugly life she had led, displaying her greed to its fullest, was finally breaking out from its shell. Your heart too, I will. I will. Aureli, who was making a heated speech, suddenly closed her mouth. She could feel killing intent in front of her. A Stein she had never seen before was standing in front of her. Is that all? At last. The thought, did I raise my daughter poorly, finally crossed Tez's mind. No. Aureli slowly stepped back, finally coming back to her senses. With a pale face, she realized the mistake she had made in her head. No. Then, she began to pull her hair furiously. She grabbed at her hair with such force, that her fake fingernails began to fall onto the carpet. I never wanted this. Stein issued a command to O'Reilly, who seemed at a loss. Get out. Leave. Begone from this place. What? O'Reilly replied with a stupid look on her face. Stein did not reply. He simply sent a look indicating that if she did not listen, he would kill her right here and now. Such was the killing intent swirling all around him. Father! The assassins have retreated. In the room, which felt as though it would explode any second, the first and second sons of the house entered the office. They looked like they were in combat up until recently, with their clothes being in utter disarray. Father! Why, you were here too, Mother? But, why does the atmosphere in the room seems off? It seems as though it has finally begun. How angry must he be for it to be like this? Even at a distance, Ian was shaking as he could feel Stein's killing intent as clear as day. It finally seemed like the persecution for the hidden deeds of the past had started. Young master! Where Count Stein was? As Ian was imagining what the view was like beyond the wall, he slowly turned his head as he couldn't feel someone's presence anymore. Young master! Riley! As there was no reply after Ian called out, Iris began to look around the room to locate her son. He had been sitting on the bed while licking his lips just a moment before, and now he had disappeared. Hey! Sierra also realized Riley had disappeared, and opened her eyes wide. Young master! Young master! Riley! Riley had vanished into thin air. At a moment when assassins could still be skulking about in the mansion, the word kidnapped came into all three of their heads. She was banished. And in glorious fashion, no less. In front of her two sons, O'Reilly was banished from the Iphelleta house. No. It's a lie. Her father, Tez, followed O'Reilly from behind and watched her walk in despair. A wave of regret swept over his mind. Her spoiled upbringing had come back to bite them in the back. Retreat. Tez sent the mental message with a dismal look on his face. He had ordered a full retreat for all the assassins who had invaded the mansion. It must be a dream. When I open my eyes again, I will be in my bed. Yes. Yes. Tez bit his lips, watching his daughter escape from reality. Suddenly, a thought struck him. If he had decided not to visit the mansion today, could they have avoided all of this? He considered it. At the end of the thought, he shook his head and rejected the idea. Even if it wasn't today, it was bound to happen sooner or later. There is nothing that can be hidden forever. Tez knew that well. His daughter's banishment was just the same. The truth was bound to leak into the world eventually. This is a good thing. It was better to be punished earlier. If they could learn from this, they could get through the situation well. Tez was a man who had the money and power to make it happen. They won't spread the news everywhere, since it involves their honor as well. Tez, who had finished organizing his next moves, put his hand on his daughter's shoulder. Father, this is not true, right? There's no way. My husband would never abandon me like this. He would never do such a thing when there's Ryan and Lloyd as well. It's all right, O'Reilly. We can still salvage the situation. Tez tried to reason with her, but she still seemed to be out of her mind. This is all her fault. Her father's words did not reach her as she swore vengeance with her eyes burning with rage. Iris. It's because that B*TCH Iris seduced him. O'Reilly's thoughts carried on beyond certainty, to the point of zealous conviction. The Lord Stein Iphelleta's concubine, Iris, was the cause of her expulsion. O'Reilly was convinced that she herself had done nothing wrong to deserve it. If she's dead, she just needs to die. That's it. O'Reilly began to emit bloodlust around herself. A shadow appeared on Tez's face as he witnessed his daughter's menacing look. She's going to have a hard time. To bring her sanity back. To re-educate her from the ground up. To change her lover's mind. Tez sighed as he judged that none of those will be easy to do. Ah! For how long did they walk away from the mansion? A boy's voice abruptly came from in front of them. Both Aurelie, who had walked with a raging face, and Tez, who was following her from behind, stopped. Hey, what's this? Did all the fun stuff finish already? From out of their sight, the voice inquired. It was directed at Aurelie and Tez. Who is it? The sun had set and it was difficult to see around the area. Tez, with his nerves on the edge, sent a question back with a frown. Bushes rustle with a different sound when a person walked through them. Within the peace and quiet, a noise sounded as if searching for something. It was not harsh, but it wasn't soft either. It seems like it's finished. The voice came from the front, saturated with the feelings of remorse for missing out on the incident. And once more the footsteps followed. Munch, munch. The one in the darkness seemed to be eating something. Wait, this voice. Where have I heard it before? Tez's brows twitched as he stood in front of his daughter. He remembered hearing this voice very recently. Where was it? Where? Tez's body froze like stone when he recalled. The voice was identical to the one in mental message he had heard before the invasion began this afternoon. Oh, father! He has a surprisingly soft side to him. How annoying! The footsteps came closer. As the noise continued, a boy who had a bag full of white cotton appeared in front of them. It's you. Aurelie, who was behind Tez, pointed her finger with her eyes wide open when she found out who the boy was. He was someone Aurelie knew all too well. Why are you here? It was Riley. In all of Iphelleta's history, he was the most useless, the laziest, and the most idle man there was. Lazy sword. He was the third son of the house. A boy who couldn't even manage to swing a wooden sword properly. A handful of cotton balls were left inside the bag. Riley finished the remaining cotton balls and replied after swallowing. I wanted to see something interesting. What? Aurelie gave him an unbelieving look. Do you so desperately want to meet your end here? Aurelie wanted to ask that, but the question could not come out of her mouth. Tez took his dagger out, fully intent on killing the boy. The same intent could be felt all around the area. They were the assassins under Tez's command. I wanted to sort out my personal problem. Riley moved his hand as he continued. Swish! Riley chucked the bag behind him and stretched his neck left and right, his gaze increasing in intensity. He warned them. You guys. I can forgive you guys since you didn't come here to piss me off. I'm letting you guys go this time for listening to my warning previously. The truth was Riley himself had killed some of the hooded men who were attempting to use him as a hostage, but that fact wasn't all that important. It's annoying too. Riley opened and closed his fists as he continued. But, not Lady Aurelie. He added that at the end, Lady Aurelie couldn't go unpunished. Ah! Hold on, you're not Lady Aurelie anymore. Riley quickly noted his mistake. He believed it was poor manners to call her lady since she was banished today. What should I say? Even in this dire situation, Riley pondered and then asked in a relaxed tone, with a smile. Ms. Aurelie. You. In a fit of rage, Aurelie took Tez's spare dagger from his belt and threw it at Riley. As if she had inherited her talent as an assassin from her father, the dagger went straight toward Riley's lips. It was to split his cocky mouth in half. Yeah, I can't let Ms. Aurelie go that easily. Riley continued as he dodged the dagger by tilting his head. How did he? For that lazy child to dodge the dagger, and so effortlessly at that? Aurelie opened her mouth wide as she could not hide her surprise. Meanwhile, despite being surrounded by assassins, Riley looked completely relaxed. You need to pay dearly for hurting my mother. You can always come back for revenge too. Riley's voice suddenly sunk low. The leisurely atmosphere around Riley changed, and cold winds began to swirl around. Like sharp daggers, the winds cut deep. What, they? Aurelie and Tez stood still, unable to believe what they were seeing. Suddenly, the boy was holding a single wooden sword in his right hand. Jakey, out-of-topic advertisement, go watch Kimi no Nawa. Is this the first time in this life? Riley thought to himself as he surveyed the area. He had done it countless times before in his previous life, but this was the first time in this life. Using the sword, that is. I wonder how much I can do. Riley's fingers twitched around the wooden sword. As if checking all of his fingers, he moved them all one by one until he was satisfied and tucked his chin in. The air was so thick with killing intent that it could explode at any moment. Kill him. Aurelie, who had been looking blankly at Riley, opened her mouth. Her shoulders were still shaking from the shock caused by the aura Riley was putting out. Whether the shock led to hatred or fear was unknown. I said kill him. She bellowed. She had ordered her subordinates to kill Riley, who was standing in front of them. Although she was banished from the mansion, she was still the daughter of their master, and so they quickly moved to follow her orders. Their first course of action was throwing their daggers. Wait, Stow. Tez, who remembered the mental message incident before the attack, tried to shout, but it was already too late. 10 or so knives were thrown, and the fight had begun. Ah! The thoughts of his past came as he watched the daggers fly toward him. Riley bit his lip silently as he was reminiscent of his previous life. They weren't the most pleasant memories. It's bringing me back. In his past life, he had once lost his loved ones to assassins. It was because of the belief that a hero saving the world should avoid taking lives. Thinking of them as people with families rather than criminals, he had shown mercy and let the assassins he had captured himself go free. And then, tragedy struck. What came after was a betrayal of his trust, and the lifeless bodies of those dear to him. This situation. In the darkness. The knives which had been thrown all around him by the hooded men, and the situation he was in now. It reminded him of all the incidents that occurred because he was too soft back then. Well, I can't repeat the same mistake. Riley slowly moved forward. He quickly spun his eyes around, counting the number of knives and analyzing the angles at which they were flying in, then twisted his torso by moving his shoulder in a diagonal angle. What is he up to? Everyone's eyes were focused on him as, instead of reflecting the knives back with his wooden blade, he held it pointed down onto the ground. Hey! It seemed as though Riley, who was standing so defenselessly, would quickly turn into a pincushion with countless daggers in him. But not a single knife managed to pierce him. All of the daggers had unfathomably managed to miss by a hair's breadth. What? Because so many daggers were thrown at once, it appeared as if some had indeed succeeded in scratching the clothes he was wearing, but the important fact was that not a single dagger managed to hit him. You guys remember now, that it was self-defense. Riley spoke. It was them who attacked first. Although he never had the intention to let any of them live from the beginning, but he wanted to have an excuse for possible feelings of guilt that may come afterwards. Don't go around spreading rumors in hell. With his strength focused on his toes, he kicked off the ground he was standing on. Riley disappeared and a small hole was made upon where he previously stood. Then Riley, who had vanished, appeared in an instant in front of the hooded man that was closest to him. The hooded man made eye contact with the black-haired boy, felt chills going up his spine. Hey! And when he was about to shudder. Why, is my sight? Within the cold night. The hooded man, who wanted to tremble perhaps from the killing intent, realized that he could not move his body. Then, his vision simply moved up into the air. The world spun. Thud. When the hooded man's sight fell onto the ground, his consciousness was no longer there. His head was rolling on the ground, with his eyes devoid of life. What? What just happened? Nobody had noticed his movements. In an instant, one of the assassins had lost his head to the boy. Not with a sharp metal sword, but with a training sword normally used against a dummy. They weren't sure what had happened, but they knew that there was clear disparity in skill. This is hopeless. The sight they had just witnessed was so shocking, that all of the hooded men thought the same thing. So, the desire to escape flooded their minds. Their eyes were filled with fear as they lost all will to fight. Wait, my body! The ability to flee from one's current location, it is without a doubt one of the most important skills an assassin should have. Another emotion began to well up in their eyes as they prioritized their survival. Confusion. Their bodies simply did not move. What's up with my body? Is God messing with time? While some of the assassins who were rooted began to think that, Riley continued to move alone. I can't move. The hooded men couldn't even twitch their fingers or toes. Helpless. That was the word that would best describe them now. This can't possibly be happening. Amidst the hooded men who were frozen like statues, Riley jumped from one person to the next, mercilessly swinging about his wooden sword. With every slash, another head landed upon the ground. They were unbelievable for strikes coming from a mere wooden sword. I'm not really into this kind of thing, and I'd rather not show any mercy for you guys, okay? Riley spoke as he recollected about his mistakes in the past. Don't take this too hard. One by one, the assassins fell. Riley spoke quietly to himself as he watched them fall with a frown. Sorry, but I won't live like my past anymore. I will avoid tragedies born from leaving any trouble behind. Riley had told himself that phrase again and again. He was no longer the hero with the holy blade, and didn't need any of the responsibilities that came with it. Leaving any seeds behind will just end up as nuisance. I will do what I want. Rest as much as I want. This is my life. In this life, that will be my path. Such had Riley decided upon. So that nothing annoying will happen. But there was one exception. So that I will never lose those who are dear to me. If it had been the past. If it had been. Then he would have shackled himself to a path with the least number of deaths for other people. As the chosen hero, he could not take the weight of lives lightly. But he lived as Riley in this world. So let me. Riley continued as he wished to lie on his soft bed at home. Let me live an easy life. Riley swung his sword once more. How, just how? Tez was staring with bloodshot eyes, shocked by Riley's ability to defeat all of the assassins effortlessly. Thankfully, although his hands and feet were paralyzed like his subordinates, he could still move his eyes. How can he not have any hesitation in killing someone? Is that really someone who's never fought with a sword for 19 years? Riley's blade didn't contain a single speck of hesitation. It was hard to believe even after seeing it with both eyes. I don't believe it. Tez may not have known it, but this was not the first time. Riley had cut another person. If you included his past. In fact, if you were to compare between the two, the number of assassins he was cutting through like butter now was drastically lower than back then. Young master. Ha, where did you run off to? After the storm that was Lady Aureli's banishment, the Iphelleta mansion had gotten rowdy once more. Riley, who was having idle chit-chat in Iris's room until now, had suddenly disappeared. Did the assassins really kidnap young master? Was it to use him as hostage? There was no way he would be playing hide-and-seek at this point in time. Ian was speculating that Aureli, who was driven into a corner, had taken Riley away to plot a scheme. Then he shook his head. He did not want to consider the worst-case scenario. As Ian bit his lips, searching every nook and cranny of the mansion, a voice came from behind. It was the maid Sira, who had been defending Iris's bedroom together with him. Ian Nim. Sira. Have you found young master? I have not. Ian, who had replied, looked at Sira intently. Ian's eyes were asking, have you found him? A shadow appeared on Sira's face as she read Ian's eyes. Neither have I. Damn it. He's not here. No matter where we look. Maybe young master is already, no longer in the mansion. It had happened even though they were on alert. Ian's face crumbled at the fact that he had lost young master even though he had been right next to him. It was the same for Syrah. She could not hide the guilt and helplessness, for being unable to defend Riley, on her face. Now is not the time to be glum. Ian Nim. Ian turned his body and began to walk. If he couldn't be found in the mansion, then there was no choice. They will look outside the mansion. Ian Nim. Wait. What are you planning to do outside the mansion? They were assassins. They are the elite assassins who managed to make the Tez Trade Guild, which was nameless, into the famous guild everyone knows, in just 30 years. Assassins of such skill would never leave any evidence behind of kidnapping. And it is night time. If you were to go out without preparation, then... Syrah's voice, which was gaining volume, was cut short. It was because Ian turned his raging face at her. Are we supposed to wait with thumbs up our asses? Ian roared at her. Syrah's shoulders flinched at the old man whose face resembled that of a demon. Kook, I apologize. That was unlike me. I cannot be the only one who is mad. Ian apologized for his slip of the tongue. His fist had been shaking for a long time. No, I understand. Just like Ian. Syrah, who had been biting her lip, angry at the fact that she could not do anything, realized something and called Ian with both her eyes wide. Wait, Ian Nim. Ian looked at Syrah with a question mark above his head. What went through her mind was how the kitchen looked. There was something, which bothered me in the kitchen. Something that bothered you. I overlooked it before, but, the crate filled with corn, was open. Only that box, nothing else. Just the corn crate. Ian's brows twisted. Corn? Why corn? What about it? Oh yes, Ian Nim was not here. Just before, Riley had talked about corn in Iris's bedroom. It's something like a snack. You make it with some butter and corn. He had said those nonchalant words which did not suit the serious situation. I guess it's a woman's intuition? We should search there again. Reporting all that had happened before, Syrah began to urge Ian to search the kitchen once more. Maybe we might find some evidence for young master's disappearance. What is this? Both Ian and Syrah flinched. Riley disappeared. Behind them, stood Count Stein and his two sons. On the path connecting the Iphelleta mansion and Ifa village, there was a forest. If someone were to ask of the state of the forest right now. It was filled with stench of blood. The pools of blood made by the headless bodies of the assassins would make anyone turn back in horror. Am I dreaming right now? The boy who was walking toward him as he swung the blade in the air. It was a sight that made Tez convinced that he was dreaming. It was Riley. The lazy, slothful boy, he as the master of the trading guild never had any interest in, was now edging closer after killing countless assassins like a demon. Now too. Riley mumbled. He was telling them they were next. Tez and Lady Aurelie were the last ones left. Tez's eyes began to shift around as he regained his consciousness. Just as Riley had stated, there weren't any assassins left around them. I can't die like this. It seemed that Riley never had any intention to let any witnesses live. That was what Tez believed. Not even as an assassin, but as a merchant, he should be able to figure that much out. He was also aware that he needed to put everything he had on the line to be able to get out alive. If he couldn't, then at least his daughter. Did the gods send him help? Tez's lips slowly began to show movement. He began to stutter on his words. Master Riley. Riley, who was standing in front of them with his sword held up high, stopped at Tez's voice. Please. Riley's eyes narrowed. Tez swallowed loudly at his stare. He had seen many people as the master of the trading guild, but he was unable to read the thoughts of the boy in front of him. In contrast to Riley's young age, Tez could see maturity and experience behind those eyes. You may kill me. Tez's eyes shifted to the side. What his eyes were searching was the daughter who was behind him, Aurelie. She may have grown up a little twisted, but she was his only child. You may kill me, but my daughter, let Aurelie live. Tez looked at Riley convinced of his own demise, while his daughter whose lips quivered in fear had her body paralyzed. The limit of my restraint was 5 minutes, no, 4 minutes. Riley mumbled to himself in response to Tez's pleading. Tez blinked his eyes, unable to hear those words, then began to beg once more. It is true the child has done wrong, but she wasn't as bad as now before. She was a nice girl. Just let the daughter live. Please let her live. It's as I expected. Riley replied. Tez's eyes shook slightly after hearing his reply. As he expected? What did he expect? Before he could reply back, Riley's wooden sword cut through the wind. It was the greatest mercy Riley could give them. Riley had chosen to take their lives at the same time, to not let them see each other die. Finished. The father and daughter collapsed onto their knees and fell forward. Riley's face began to darken as he saw the bodies grow cold on the ground. Riley was staring at the two bodies as if contemplating something, then turned his head. Unlike 5 minutes ago, there were bodies everywhere. Ha! Riley's face began to worsen as he stabbed the wooden sword in the ground. Riley pressed his temples as if having a headache, then leaned forward and covered his mouth with his hand. Yoob! As if he was feeling nauseated, Riley began to throw up. It wasn't because of the guilt for his actions. It was because he released his mana in order to stop all the assassins, Tez and Aurelie, from moving. It was the side effect of restraint, which made his ki flow erratically. Ha! Riley, who just threw up on the ground all the popcorn he had recently eaten, stopped his hand that was about to wipe his mouth. He thought he might garner some suspicion if he were to leave any strange marks on his clothes. I can say these cuts were made from the kitchen, but this is different. Other than the cuts on his clothes, he didn't have any blood on him. In order to not leave any evidence, he made sure to be careful with every strike he made at the assassins. After all the trouble he had gone through, taking all the most difficult actions, it would be quite unfair if his capabilities were to be found out because of the puke he had produced. No, I could say I got sick from eating too fast. It's nothing like blood. As he began to think, he determined this was acceptable enough and began to wipe his mouth with his sleeves. Well, this body is different from before. And this body is too young to store anywhere near the amount of power I had before. I guess there's nothing I can do. Riley's hands were shaking from the adverse effect of using his power too much. Riley began to talk to himself again as he clenched and unclenched his hand. This was something like a test, but I don't think I can use mana for a while. If I'm moving, I should just use the sword. His opponents were assassins this time. Not just any assassins, but the elites who were masters of escape, of which he could not leave any behind in order to keep his secret. It was quite violent, but Riley's choice now was the most efficient one he could have chosen. Then, shall I go back? He already had a plan for cleaning the bodies. So he checked his appearance once more and began to walk. Ian would have gone nuts at this point. Riley made a bitter smile as he decided an apology was in order. The cold night's winds began to blow on the corpses in the forest. The incident of Riley's disappearance had finally reached Count Stein's ears. Syrah and Ian, who were trying not to anger Stein, who had exploded before because of Lady Aurelie, gasped loudly and then began to make hiccups. Tell me again carefully, Ian. Riley has disappeared. That is. Riley was already being treated like trash in the mansion. What would happen if the words "he has likely been kidnapped by the assassins" were said when Count Stein was completely furious already? Ian and Syrah, who did not want to consider the consequences, shut their mouths and looked at each other. Hypothetically, Count Stein was likely to say these words. What? He's been kidnapped by the assassins? Pathetic, there is no need to look for him. The Iphelleta house does not need such a failure. Then Riley would be in similar situation to Otherworldly, who had just been banished. Which meant, they wouldn't be allowed to save the young master. That is. Ian, who had little talent for words, began to squeeze his brain for ideas. How can I get through this crisis? What excuses do I make? Just when his dry lips were about to open. Did you call for me? A familiar voice sounded behind Ian. Young master. Why are you looking at me like that? Ian turned his head and stared at Riley, who had appeared behind him. Riley shrugged his shoulders at the stares he received from Ian and Sira, who looked as if they were possessed. Well, it seems like you were talking about me. Riley turned his eyes from beyond Ian's shoulders to Stein. His father was standing with a serious face and his arms crossed, as if he were annoyed with something. Young master. Ian and Sira's faces suddenly entered Riley's view as he was exchanging looks with his father. Riley shrugged his shoulders at their sudden impulse. Hey, yet. Where, just where have you been? Yes. Do you know how worried Ian and I were? Their faces were filled with worry. Funny thing was, Ian and Sira's expressions were completely different. Ian's face had gone red, as if he were about to cry. Sira's face had gone blue with hysteria. Riley's lips began to twitch, as the faces they made seemed opposite to what he thought would happen. Ha ha, dot. Riley suddenly burst out with laughter. As it seemed Riley wasn't aware of how worried they were, red-faced Ian's hand was shaking in the air as he continued to talk. Laugh? Are you laughing? Young master, are you really laughing right now? Ah ha ha ha. Sorry, but, your faces were totally out of sync. Sira puffed her cheeks in anger. That's rude. To laugh in this situation, do you have any idea? How many times had his heart stopped beating? As he was thinking that his heart won't last long at this rate, Ian's body began to show warning signs. Ugh! All of a sudden Ian's right hand was grabbing at the back of his neck. Ian Nim. Ian. There's a saying that time takes its toll on everyone. As Ian was about to collapse, unable to endure all the excitement he went through today, Sira, who was next to him, quickly came to support him. Is he all right? Riley, who seemed worried, stepped forward and asked Sira. Sira, who was holding Ian up from collapsing, checked his pulse, then sighed as if she had done all she could have. He's just unconscious. Oh dear. The old butler, who would shoot swear words like a thug when no one was watching, fainted because his master laughed. Sira was so dumbfounded that she forgot to scold Riley, then slowly peeked behind her. Because Count Stein, who had yet to leave the place, was still standing in place. Sira addressed him with a bow. It was a gesture to forgive Ian's shameful display. Riley. Yes. In response to Stein's voice, Riley killed his smile as much as possible, and replied instantly, unlike his usual self. It's because he thought it would be annoying if he were to anger his father right now. What's that? Hey? This. Stein questioned the paper bag Riley was holding on his left hand. It seemed like something was inside, as it made a muffled sound whenever the bag moved. It was. It's popcorn. Corn. Stein tilted his head in response to a word he never heard before. It's a snack made of corn, and I wanted to eat some today, so I made some. I was intending to give some to my mother, but would you like some as well? Young master, for that you'd go to the kitchen. Watching Riley hand the popcorn bag with such an innocent face, Sira, who was holding Ian, mumbled with a little melancholy. The thought that it was a good thing that Ian was not awake crossed her mind. It seemed it would not have ended so easily if he was awake. But, there was no one when I went to the kitchen. Young master, wait, what's that? As she was pointing out the fact that the kitchen was empty when she went there, she tilted her head in query. There was something dirty on Riley's sleeves. This is, I ate too much too fast. So I threw up. As if embarrassed, Riley's face went red as he replied while avoiding Sierra's eyes. He also added the fact that he cleaned his mouth with his sleeves, and quickly apologized to Sierra before she could scold him. Maybe you missed me when I was off to the bathroom. Sorry, for trying to eat it all myself. That's not what you should apologize for. Stop. Before she could correct Riley's words, Sierra's speech was cut short. It was because Stein, who was standing behind, opened his mouth. You may go back in the room, Sierra. But Sierra bit her lips with worry that Master Riley was going to be severely punished by Count Nim. She continued to fidget in order to stay behind to leave some words in defense of the young master, but Stein was having none of it. You can't hold up Ian forever. Right. Sierra rolled her eyes about and looked at Stein from the front, and Ryan and Lloyd, who were standing besides him. Especially at the two brothers' eyes, that looked far more malicious than Stein's. It had to be due to the incident with Lady O'Reilly before. Right. Stein asked Sierra once more. It was worrying. Although she wanted to help. But, since she cannot disobey her master, as Riley would be harmed more by such actions. Yes. Sierra finally nodded and began to move. Young master, please don't anger them too much, you know what I mean, right? Sierra whispered to Riley as she walked past him. Riley sent her away as he replied that it would be all right with a smirk. Riley. With Sierra gone, Riley, who was standing alone on his side of the corridor, removed his smile and replied with a serious face. Yes. From what I've heard, that paper Ian brought to me, it was you who found it. Since it wasn't much of a secret anyway, Riley replied honestly. That's right. In order to show utmost respect to his father, Riley stood with his hands clasped behind him. As his hands moved, the popcorn made muffled sounds. You. As if he was annoyed with the muffled sounds, the second son Lloyd came forward with a strained face. Our mother has just been banished, and you think it's all right to eat snacks? Mother. If it's the mother Lloyd was talking about, then it would mean O'Reilly, whom Riley had just recently dealt with. They were most likely oblivious as to her disposal, but Riley had already thought of a plan wherein he acted oblivious. Therefore, he replied with a question with his eyes wide open. Ba, nisht? Lady O'Reilly. Don't act dumb. Riley. No, what just hap? Riley. Riley flinched, as if showing his innocence at Lloyd's shout that was filled with ire. If someone who didn't know Riley were to see, it would simply seem like a lazy child who was scared of his older brother. That paper, didn't you fabricate it yourself? But to Lloyd, who had gone mad with rage, logic and reason was out of question. Fabricate it. Riley quickly shook his head and looked at Stein, who was standing to the side with a pale face. The face was full of innocence. That's right. You've made up lies on paper. It seemed the message was well received, and Stein cut Lloyd's words as he frowned. Stop. As if he still had more words to say, his lips continued to move as he pointed his finger at Riley. But father. I won't repeat myself, Lloyd. Coog. As he could no longer push his words at Riley due to his father's interference, Lloyd's face crumbled as if he had tasted sheet. Riley. Yes, father. It is late now, go to your room. A sound originating from the grinding of teeth could be heard next to Stein. Considering the situation, it was definitely from Lloyd. And as he was about to go to his room after saying his farewells to his father and brothers, he stopped and turned to look at Stein. Tomorrow. I have some words to say, so as soon as you wake up, you are to bring yourself to my office. As soon as you wake up. Count Stein has ordered Riley to come the moment he's awake. The reason why he didn't choose a time of the day was likely because he knew Riley would most likely be the latest to wake up in the mansion. Yes. Riley replied. Come for what? He didn't ask such a question. He was tired from the workout before, and didn't want to drag out the conversation. His only thought was to quickly lie down on his bed. His brother Lloyd's anger only felt like a nuisance to him. Then, good night. Riley bowed once more to his father and brothers. Despite Sierra's worry, there weren't any clashes in the meeting of the brothers. What are your thoughts? As Riley disappeared from the corridor, among the 3 remaining men left, the first son Ryan asked Stein. It was about Riley. What do you think? Stein asked in return. After a pause, Ryan replied as he watched Riley's back recede further into the distance. I do not think he is lying. As Ryan spoke of Riley's innocence, Lloyd could not withhold himself and spoke up. Brother. As he could not believe Ryan's speculation, Lloyd spoke with clenched fists. To read the man's eyes is an ability every great swordsman must have. You must be able to determine right from wrong, and it allows you to read your opponent's attack and so plan out your future moves. Ryan's cold eyes were pointed at his brother. Losing mother was unfortunate, but there is nothing we can do. We cannot let our emotions cloud our judgment for this incident. To have an assassin among the Iphelleta house, truth be told I am ashamed. I almost want to send words of gratitude to Riley. Brother. How could you say that? Then are you saying I am wrong? That you would prefer that those facts never came to light? Lloyd dropped his head and his fists shook. There was nothing he could say back. That's not the case, it's Riley. HOH, so what I saw was not the truth. Is that what you want to say? Lloyd. It was bound to come out. It's better that it was exposed now. There is nothing you can hide forever. But brother, mother, what about mother? Lloyd, who was so eager to talk back, closed his mouth. It was different from Lloyd, but Ryan was also angry. That his mother was an assassin. That his brother wouldn't listen to him. You are standing in front of your father. Ryan's last words were a warning. At his brother's quiet voice, Lloyd could no longer nag and closed his mouth. His best course of action was to bite his lips in frustration. If you are going to continue acting like a child, then you are better off staying silent. There is a saying, inaction can get you halfway. The usually kind, gentle brother seemed a great deal stricter today. As feelings of betrayal, frustration, and rage made his heart pound faster than ever, Lloyd clutched his chest and dropped his chin. It was to acknowledge the warning and keep the silence. Firstly, I have the same thoughts as Ryan. Riley does not seem to be lying. Stein, who was watching the tension between the two, spoke. He also did not see any sense of falsehood in Riley's eyes. But no, it is nothing. Stein, who was looking at the path Riley took, shook his head and turned back. Brother. Lloyd called Ryan, who was ahead of him. Although he did get angry before, Ryan stopped and turned to see his brother, as it didn't seem like he wanted to ignore him. Do you really think mother was wrong? Is that what you think? In response to those shaking words, Ryan's stiff face turned to a gentle one and walked towards Lloyd. Ryan's right hand raised. Ugh! Is he going to hit me? He closed his eyes expecting a slap to the face, but then opened them in surprise when the hand landed on top of his head instead. Lloyd. Brother. As he patted his brother's head, Ryan continued to speak. At his gentle words, Lloyd's mouth opened. The successor has not been decided, yet. The successor to the house. It was talked about before, but as Ryan has said, the successor to the Iphelleta house had not yet been decided. It might have been because Stein was still in perfect health, but some had speculated that Stein still had some expectations from his third son. Mother's incident can still be solved after the successor has been decided. Brother, then. Yes. He was talking around it, but if Ryan's words were to be summarized in one sentence, he will win the successor battle. He was planning to move after he had received the Iphelleta name. Brother. Lloyd's green eyes began to shine. Ryan chuckled at his brother's gaze of respect. I would never give Riley the position of family head just because I angered father. It's true he's lazy as hell, but we can't deny that father still sees promise in him. It would not have been odd if both of them were also banished after the Otherworldly incident, but thankfully they could stay in the mansion as they had received the family's swordsmanship. Not to mention, they weren't dropped out from the successor race, so they needed to aim for it. Let us think about mother afterwards. Yes, yes. Lloyd nodded twice at those words. Just as his brother, who was weeping from the emotions inside him, turned his gaze toward the ground. Ryan's gentle smile quickly twisted into a sinister one. The next day, past lunch and late in the afternoon, Riley rubbed his eyes and stood while he was shook left and right in front of Stein's office. Next to him was Ian, who was sweating non-stop. "Young master, how can you fall asleep now? Wake up! Now!" "Ah, all right. Man, I'm so tired too." Riley continued to complain about his lack of sleep, as he could not go to sleep until his mother's scolding was done. "Master has ordered you to come personally." "Oh dear, I should not have let my guard down at that moment, damn it." Riley, who could no longer stand Ian's nagging, placed his hand on the doorknob. As promised, Riley had come to Stein's office as soon as he woke up. "Young master, this may be an opportunity. Lady Otherworldly has been banished from the mansion. You can finally aim to compete for the successor's seat." Knock knock. Before Ian could finish his words, Riley knocked on the door with one of his hands. "Enter." It seemed the sound had reached him, and Stein's reply came from within. "I'm going in." "Why, young master?" Just as he was about to turn the knob, Riley turned his head to look at the man who was calling him. "Good luck." Although he didn't say it, he moved his lips in such way as he clenched his fist toward Riley. It was a fighting pose. Riley shook his head in disbelief and moved into the office, ignoring Ian. "Riley." As Riley entered the room, Stein, who was doing paperwork on his table, called him without even taking a glance. "Yes." "What does he want to say?" Riley reluctantly replied as he was getting a bad feeling and scratched his cheek. "Leave the mansion." "Hey." Among the many documents piled on his table, he snatched one of them and handed it to Riley after scribbling some words onto it. "That's it. Was I too distracted by the paper and misheard it?" Riley couldn't believe what he had just heard and asked back. "No, wait. What did you say?" "Leave." Stein did not reply. He was simply waiting for Riley's response with his right arm still extended. "No, just." Riley, who had his brows furrowed in shock, narrowed his eyes and stared at the piece of paper Stein was holding out. "What is that?" Stein was wordlessly shaking the paper in front of him. It seemed it was originally a rolled-up message, seeing as the sides of the paper were curled inwards. The capital." Riley mumbled to himself the word which stood out the most on the paper. The capital. The large city located outside the Iphelleta's domain. In the center was a large palace, and outside its white walls, the citizens, merchants, and nobles lived in a beautifully decorated city. Information regarding the capital's swordsmanship tournament. At our 17th tournament starting next week, we invite one of the sons of Iphelleta, widely acclaimed for their swordsmanship. We would be honored if you were to attend and set an example for this event. The words were difficult to see from afar, so Riley approached Stein's desk and took the paper to read its contents. In summary, the message on the paper contained what Riley despised the most. Leave the mansion. This was most likely the reason why Stein has said such words. To compete in the swordsmanship tournament. I mean, even if you were to be a man of few words. You go to the capital's swordsmanship tournament. It would have been much easier to say it that way, and there was no reason for him to say leave the mansion now, was there? Riley, who was complaining in his mind, placed the paper back on the desk and began to slowly walk backwards. Ha ha ha. Riley. Father, you know what my answer is, right? It will be a good experience. But I don't need experience. Your brothers have been there too. Why don't they go one more time? It's a nice place. This letter was for you. What? No way. It's what they refer to as a love call. What did he say now? Love call? To think such words would come from the hard-headed Stein. When Riley stopped his backwards pacing as if he was struck by something, Stein pushed his chair back and stood up behind the desk. I won't go. At the sound of the chair scraping against the floor, Riley's mind came back and he shook his head as he stated his thoughts. Crying will not work since he's not so young anymore. Therefore he must state his intentions clearly. I won't go to the swordsmanship tournament. For how long will you live so self-centeredly? You should put an end to such a lifestyle soon. I don't have talent. Riley looked at his hand and replied with a tired tone. I'd tried it last time with a wooden sword. I was worried about my mother. I wanted to defend her. But, my sword was pathetic. Ha! You should have seen Ian's face that time, father. What a sight that was! Some of it was true, some of it was false. Although it was unknown if Stein could find out which part was the lie. I know. I've always known that I have no talent for swordsmanship. So I'm giving up. Let me give up. Please don't force me on this path anymore. Because I really like reading. If anything, I'll find a path to become a wizard, Riley added in his head. It felt like Stein would give up after hearing those words. I just want to live a leisurely life. I want to avoid receiving high hopes from others. Riley bit his lips because the vow he had made and kept ever since he was born anew was about to slip out. Riley. Riley flinched at Stein's voice. An average person would not have noticed it, but under that bland dry voice of Stein's was a small hope. Riley's 5 fingers which were pointing down began to twitch. His hand was damp with sweat. If it's you. We believe in you. You can do it. Because it's you. Of course you can. You're the hero. The voices of his past companions echoed in his ears. He could remember their bloodied bodies with their gaping mouths in his head. Riley swallowed loudly. Don't look. Don't look at me with those eyes. Riley's mouth was gaping as he thought to himself. Slowly, Riley began to step back with cold sweat on his head. Riley. There's a difference between a novice's tournament and the capital's tournament. When we told you to compete in the novice tournament, you made all sorts of excuses to not go. Stein grabbed the paper titled Capital Swordsmanship Tournament and walked toward Riley. But, this place is different. You have come of age as well, so I won't go easy on you anymore. You have to attend to at least show your face to the king. Creak. Stein opened his eyes in surprise as he heard the door open during his lecture. It was because Riley managed to sneak his way to the door without him noticing. Wah! After the creak of the door, a scream came. It was Ian's. Ah, no. I wasn't eavesdropping at all. The door felt really good so I just had my cheek on it. It seemed Ian was curious about the conversation and tried to snoop in, as you could see a clear red mark on one side of his face. Hey? Why, young master? Where are you going? Ian tilted his head questioningly at the sight of Riley who was slowly retreating without lowering his guard. Ian. I leave father to you. Young master. It seems the door had excellent soundproof quality and Ian couldn't listen to the conversation, as Ian was confused to what was happening. His actions of pressing his ear to the door was for naught. Ian, grab Riley. I will discipline him later. Stein ordered Ian who was lying on his chest. Sorry. As Ian replied in confusion, Stein shouted. Grab Riley. Again. He's going to play hide and seek again. Stein knew very well that whenever Riley was driven into a corner, he would hide himself in the mansion like a herbivore and reappear when everything has ended. Therefore, to not miss him, he had to catch Riley before he lost him. This is like. Isn't it just like the assassin which the mansion despise? For the child of his lover to act like an assassin. Stein frowned and grinned his teeth in anger. Riley, you better stop now. Cunning child. Considering his lack of interest in the sword, he was an unusually bright child. There was no weakness to use against the third child. If anything, it would be his mother Iris. But that's someone Stein cannot touch either. Riley knew that too. Therefore, Riley. He can ignore his father's words and run like this. Damn it, Sierra! Stein shouted at Sierra, who ran into Riley just around the corner. Sierra flinched with surprise. Ugh! Master! Riley, get Riley! The young master. She had no idea why, but it was her master's order. Because she couldn't ignore it, she turned around to grab Riley, but then widened her eyes in shock. Hey? He was just here. Just 3 seconds ago he was standing next to her. Riley had disappeared all of a sudden. Just a moment ago. Phew. Somewhere within the mansion, Riley sighed as he leaned his back in a shady place. I've accidentally given some advice. During his escape from Stein, Riley had run into Sierra, who was training with a broom in each hand, and gave an unsolicited suggestion. Was I being too nosy? In reality, it was closer to a teaching rather than a piece of advice. Riley spoke in a questioning tone, saying, "Isn't doing this better than that?" to her, who was squeezing in her training during her cleaning duty. It's not even a joke. For someone who is both lazy and has nothing to do with swords to correct her? Unthinkable. Tisk. Riley remembered how Sierra's face went blank after hearing Riley's words of teaching. It was embarrassing. And what gave him the idea to put his index finger on his lip and say SHH after correcting her? At his mistake, and the embarrassment that followed it, Riley furiously scratched his head with his face going red, not knowing what to do. The good side was that no one was watching his current state. He was currently in one of the secret rooms hidden within the mansion. It's because of my memories of my previous life. Riley mumbled. The stress from resurrecting with his memories intact was quite significant. The advice he threw at Sierra was one of the bad habits he had before. How his mouth wouldn't stop running when he sees others swinging their swords. And that's why I tried so hard not to go to the training grounds. In the Iphelleta house, even the maids would fit their training in the slightest gaps in their schedule. Previously, he was blessed and received the holy sword. Making his accomplishments as a hero, throwing countless swings of his sword. He could never ignore those who would put so much effort into it. Therefore, he tried not to see, or create any such situations since he was young. And it had to come out today. His memories of the past were a lot clearer than usual just then. Perhaps his conversation with his father forced the memories out of his head. While he was running, Riley, who was seeing his past play out before his eyes, ended up giving advices to Sierra. Oh! Master Riley? What brought you here? How about you use the fingers? If you change the angle to a reverse grip in the middle, the next move can become much smoother. Sorry. Your finger. Roll the sword. No. It's nothing. Sorry, I'm quite busy right now. Act like you didn't hear anything. Damn it, Sierra. Ugh. Master. Uh-oh. Riley, get Riley. The young master. Riley wrapped his face in his hands with a sigh as he remembered what had just happened. Sierra may not have the loudest of mouths, but she's still a maid. A maid who liked a good gossip. If she were to try spreading what happened just now, then, with my own hands, he may end up in a situation where he would taking care of Sierra. Personally. Riley sighed again as he wished as hard as he can for that situation to not arrive. As he dropped his hands which were on his face, he closed his mouth which was open from that sigh. At the same time, he also shut his eyes completely. As he leaned on his back, Riley's key sense widened. A few seconds later Riley began to breathe deeply. It was not the one people of Iphelleta house learnt, but his own breathing technique. He learnt it in his previous life, and modified as he saw fit. It was Riley's original breathing technique. The faint mana floating around him slowly began to gather toward Riley. The recovery was, rather than being efficient, it was more like devouring his surroundings. The mana of high density gathered, while the chaotic mana was pushed back. Was that the reason? The pitch-black space began to light up with what seemed like fireflies. It was mana. As if surprised at Riley's presence, mana that had lit up began to absorb into Riley's body. Now, as he sensed the mana flowing into his body, Riley opened his eyes slightly and thought to himself, "Shall I hear what's happening?" Riley's hide and seek has begun. Young Master. Master Riley. The Iphelleta mansion had become rowdy once more. It was turned upside down because of Lady Aurelie yesterday, and another incident had happened now. Thankfully it was much less serious compared to Lady Aurelie's banishment. Where did he go? The situation could be summarized in a single sentence: Riley had disappeared again. His hide-and-seek had begun. A game of hide-and-seek that everyone who lived within the mansion knew. Everyone was aware that once he began to hide, the third son would not show himself until many days later. Therefore, everyone was expecting that this time would not be any different from before. How are we supposed to find him when even Master Stein can't either? Sierra pouted with her chin on the broom. She was scolded greatly by Stein. There had been a chance to catch Riley before he disappeared, but she could not catch him. That was the reason. It's because young Master said something strange. While Sierra was embarrassed at being found out on her attempt to train during cleaning, Riley had said some strange words, giving her a piece of advice to do it differently as if he were a teacher. How about you use your fingers? Fingers? Sierra took her chin off the broom and looked at her fingers. Her head had begun to spin slowly as she recalled Riley's voice. What Sierra spun her head to look at was another broom that was leaning onto the wall. She was a dual-wielding swordswoman who relied on speed and fought with a sword in each hand. Therefore, in order to keep up her training during her cleaning duties, she would always take 2 brooms with her to fulfill her duty. Today was no different. Although she was holding only 1 broom now, if you counted the broom next to the wall, she had brought 2 brooms with her. It was for her training. Just once. An advice from her young master. Although it is rejected by everyone else in the mansion, for some reason Ian would always say our young master, the best. Young master, so cool. She was curious. Why would Ian praise the lazy master so? Maybe the answer lies in that advice he gave? As those thoughts reached her, Sierra grabbed onto the spare broom on the wall as if she were possessed. I'll try it out. With her legs at shoulder width. As taught by the Iphelleta's swordsmanship manual for servants, she would swing the brooms by switching her hands as if she was dancing. It was a practice Sierra did often. Recently she was facing a difficulty at the 3rd step of the following move. Here. At the spot she's stuck on. As told by Riley, she spun the broom with her fingers and her eyes widened. Hey! The move became much sharper. Sierra's jaws dropped as she went from the 3rd step to 4th so comfortably. But I've been stuck on it for so long. How can just using fingers make it so much easier? Wait, one more. Unable to believe how easily she connected the moves, she got back into stance. Is this what the others would call an epiphany? As Sierra continued through the moves with her lips apart, she swallowed her spit. The method now was not written anywhere on the family's manuscript. It works. What? How can it be so easy? Swoosh. Swoosh. The 2 brooms made a somewhat sharp noise through the air. All she did was use the fingers to connect the moves. But it was different. It was simpler, and faster than before. She suddenly got the creeps. Sira could feel the nerves creep up her back and shook as she dropped the 2 brooms. She could finally understand a little, the feelings of the old butler who would always sing praises of the young master. One more. One more time. As Sira grabbed the broom on the ground, she repeatedly said one more time 7 times. She changed the angle of the broom slightly each time she repeated the move while talking to herself, then startled herself when she felt someone behind her and turned around. Sira? What are you doing here? It was Iris, who walked into the room which was to be cleaned. She had no ability to hide her presence. Therefore, Sira sighed in relief as she watched Iris walk slowly towards her. The mansion was still on high alert after the recent assassin incident. Ha, Lady Iris. Pohub. What is that? That weird pose. This is... Sira's face went red as she was standing in a strange way due to stopping midway in her training, and pulled the 2 brooms into her chest. Ah ha ha ha, I was training. I have shown you something embarrassing. She grabbed both brooms with one hand and lifted the end of her skirt with the other as she bent her knees slightly. It was clumsy, but it was a curtsy that still retained its proper form. It's all right. It is nice to see someone make such effort to improve themselves, no matter how it looks. In fact, I should be embarrassed myself. It seems like I've interrupted your training. Please refrain from saying improving myself. It hurts. Hurts. Truth is, I was slacking off. Sira smiled shyly as she replied. She may not be able to answer to Stein this way, but it was okay for Iris. If Ian was responsible for Riley, Sira was responsible for Iris. The servant who spends most time with her was Sira. Talking like friends is just another daily occurrence for them. Slacking off. Well, Master Riley disappeared. Riley, who had disappeared yesterday, disappeared again? Iris's face went pale with the worry that there may be assassins still left in the mansion. Riley has. Oh, it's not what you're worried about. Truth is, Master Stein called Master Riley in. It's the tournament season. I believe it's because of that. Ah. Iris nodded as she made an expression of understanding. Is it hide and seek? Yes. And I'm supposed to find him, but my focus turned to training halfway. Sira awkwardly laughed. When the 3rd son of the mansion hides, no one can find the boy. That was the truth. O'Reilly. Well, is there nothing you want from him? Want from him? Yes. It seems like Master Stein wants to make Master Riley do something. But Master Riley would just run away. Yet you seem different from him. Aren't you bothered? Like that talk about the successor. This was a question which was asked often by Ian as well. Even the now banished Lady O'Reilly was quite strict with her children. But Iris was the complete opposite. No matter how lazy her son was, she would just smile warmly back at him. I don't think that's the case. Really? I've scolded Riley just yesterday as well. Weren't you watching too? I know the popcorn you've made yourself tastes nice, but how can you worry everyone around you so much? It was Iris who forced Riley to apologize to Ian, Sira, and herself. Well, I think I can safely say it was too soft. Then. Sira's words could not be finished. It seemed Iris still had something to say, and continued. I have been taught that a mother must understand what her son's thoughts are. Of course I'm no psychic, and I can't read what he's thinking, but I can understand just what emotion he's going through. As his mother. She smiled bitterly when she expressed what she thought a mother should be, and then continued to explain how she saw Riley, as a mother. Sometimes, I can see his eyes shake, or see an endless sadness on his face. I've wondered many times why he would make such face, but I could never find out. So I've asked him privately. Is there anything making you sad or causing you pain? Do you know what Riley said? It was something Sira, who was always next to Iris, never noticed. Sleeping or reading. Or just consuming food? The young master who would hum as he leaned on the apple tree would show such a face in front of his mother? It was unexpected. Sira asked in a surprised tone. What did he say? He acted like he knew nothing about it. That it was nothing, that nothing like that happened. It was nothing. Yes. Even while he made a worried face as if he was being scolded. It seemed like he was trying to hide it. Iris began to play with her fingers. It hurts me that he won't tell his mother about it, but I guess it means he's thought about it as well. I'm sure it's to not make me worry. Her bitter smile began to change into a gentle, calm smile. Although still a little young to call herself a veteran mother, it was a smile that made her look so gentle, you could feel the warmth radiating from it. There must be something. In a place I don't know, when I couldn't see him, something happened to Riley. Something that would make his eyes tremble, and make a sad face as if he's shouldering the weight of the world, something like that. If I was next to my son for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, would I have found out? The answer did not come. Therefore Iris decided to be strong. As his only mother, I have to understand. Even if the people of the mansion showed hostility. Even if they pounded their chest in frustration. So, at least I won't force him to do something. At least I won't be like them. Let's believe in my son. That is what Iris decided. And she believed that her son would also believe in her one day. I will wait for him. Because I'm his mother. I just wish for Riley's happiness. More than anyone in the world. Iris was a good mother. Sira convinced herself. When I get old, get married, and have a child, I will become a mother like her. That is what Sira decided. Is something on my face? With Sira staring with such a satisfied smirk on her face, Iris questioned her. No, I was just admiring. Oh Sira! You're making me blush. Sira, who was considering whether she would need to tell Iris about Riley's advice, tightly held the broom in her hand. There is no need to tell Iris. That's what she decided. Act like this never happened. It was Riley's personal request as well. So she decided to keep her silence. Then Sira, work hard. Iris turned away after encouraging the silent Sira. Lady Iris. Are you, perhaps, going off somewhere? As the maid serving Iris, it was part of her duty to know about her whereabouts. Sira was going to follow her after her cleaning duty was finished. Well. Iris stopped at Sira's question. As if trying to hide something, she had a playful face on her. Perhaps, to the bathroom. Sorry. It's a secret. Iris then continued to walk away. Don't worry, I'm not going to hide like Riley. Phew. Riley sighed inside his hiding spot. Thankfully, after finding out the situation with his mana, there didn't seem to be a need to silence Sira himself. Well, Mother does have a good eye for judging people. Iris is not just kind. What Riley thought was her real strength was her ability to judge others. Sira was a good example, although he was still worried. Now that I think about it, she also made Ian look after me. The thought of the butler whose face would sometimes go red with rage, then cry like a little girl made Riley laugh a little. He was thankful for having someone so entertaining with him. I've gotta respect my parents. Filial piety. It was an obvious decision for the mother who would love and trust her son. Although he could not do so in his previous life, he would perform it with utmost faith in this life. As he reconfirmed his thoughts, Riley remembered Count Stein's eyes. Likely, Stein must have seen what Ian had peeked into as well. That must be the reason. The reason why he sees Riley with eyes full of expectation. Father. Stein. To Riley he was his father, therefore, his parent. If he were to respect parents, Stein is also someone to whom he must show his respect. The capital. Awkward with his words. He could only speak harsh, cold words, but he holds deep thoughts within him. That was Riley's father, Stein. Today was also the same. It was, perhaps, in order to keep Riley away from Lloyd, who was furious with O'Reilly's incident, that he was given the invite to the swordsmanship tournament. I don't think I'll be able to avoid fighting if I went. Riley frowned. Let's say he accepted his father's wishes and went to the tournament. Then what? He doubted that he would be able to hide his old habits from the past for the entire duration of the tournament. Then again, Riley shook his head as he remembered his past. Then, the mana being absorbed by Riley began to tremble. Knock. Knock. Afterwards, someone began to knock. Riley. He extinguished the glowing mana around him. Riley, who was crouching, looked up. The door began to open with a creak. Mother. Riley spoke blankly at the sight of his mother coming over to his hiding spot. Were you hiding here again? I'm sorry. I just had something to think about. Where Riley was hiding in was Iris's closet. It was one of the few places Riley could hide in the mansion. It was here that Riley polished his mana, eavesdropped on Syrah, and contemplated on his father's talk of the capital. Don't you know this is bad? As I've told you yesterday, everyone will worry if you do this. Iris bent her knees to look at Riley on equal grounds. Something to think about. Is it the capital? Even though Riley was simply throwing a tantrum, Iris's face was still filled with warmth. It seems she had some inclination to believe that her son wanted to perform his duty as a son. Riley simply nodded his head without an answer. Why? I'm just scared of the sword. Unlike the other times, Riley answered as if relying on his mother. An answer hiding his trauma of the past or the expectation that followed. He's scared of the sword. It was a rather honest answer. I see. With a small pause, Iris tilted her head, then continued to speak. Then how about a vacation? What? Riley's eyes went wide with surprise. She was smiling brightly. A vacation? With your mother? With a warm smile, Iris added. Your mother will help. Have you two packed everything you need? Yes, seems like it. The mother and son duo were standing at the mansion's gate, wearing clothes suitable for traveling. It was Riley and Iris. But will Syrah and I really be enough? That is right. In my opinion, I wish for 2 more to follow us. Let's just get going, you two will be more than enough. It seemed it was difficult for him to stay in the sun for too long, and so Riley took his first steps toward the carriage. Ian sighed at the ground as he watched Riley shamble his way into the carriage. The capital, I mean, it's good that you're going. But why must you act so? Ian Nim. Please. One thing at a time. Syrah gave Ian a sneer as she poked at him with her elbow, then bowed her head. Stein had come personally to the gates in order to bid his farewell to the two leaving for the capital. Are your preparations finished? Yes. Iris replied before Ian and Syrah could answer. There was no need for you to go too. As if unsatisfied, Stein's face crumbled as he looked at Iris and the carriage. It seemed like Riley was already lying down inside the carriage, as he could no longer be seen. That was the condition, right? Contrary to what Stein had wanted. Unable to hide her smile, Iris began to console her husband to not be so down. It's my first vacation with my son, so please don't break the mood with your jealousy. Who's jealous? You are jealous. Aren't you? HNG. Stein snorted with his arms crossed. Since you're going with him, make sure Riley actually competes. Stein. Iris narrowed her eyes and called Stein's name. Stein, with his sentence cut short, looked at Iris' eyes and flinched. For a woman who'd never practiced swordsmanship to have such charisma, it was not fair. I won't force him to do it. It's a vacation. We're just going sightseeing. As I said before, wasn't that the condition? The condition for Riley to head to the capital, it was not for Riley to compete, but rather to watch the tournament. Thanks to Iris' negotiation, Riley could see the wide world, take his mother for a vacation, and leave the mansion. It meant he didn't need to sword fight. Well, I will suggest it to him. Ugh. Iris made a small laugh as she stepped onto the carriage. All of the servants behind Stein began to bow simultaneously. It was time to leave. Then, Ian. Sira. Yes. Yes. I leave their safety to you. As Iris got onto the carriage, Stein called on the butler, Ian, and the maid, Sira, who were standing by. Ian and Sira bowed and answered at the same time. Yes, even at the cost of my life. Yes, even if it will cost my life. That was the servants' determination to protect them. Filled with loyalty, the two answered without hesitation and unsheathed their swords slightly to Stein, then began to move the baggage. Even though it was a count's family trip to the capital, the baggage was rather light. Then we shall take our leave. It seemed they decided to take turns leading the horses, with Ian on the driver's seat and Sira inside the carriage. With the crack of the whip, the two horses began to move. The carriage heading to the capital had a simple design to it. The current season was neither summer nor winter, but spring, and thus the windows were left open. It was a carriage made just for spring. It was designed so the passengers could feel the spring breeze as they traveled. It's been a while since I visited Solia, I'm excited. Solia. Ah, I forgot to tell you. Solia is the name of the capital. The capital has a name, and it's called Solia, kind of like Ifa for Ifa village. Oh? I wasn't aware. I thought it was just called the capital. Well, it's expected as you'd rarely left our domain. You better get used to it soon. When we arrive, you will hear Solia rather than the capital a lot more. Sira began to explain Solia with a bright smile, as Iris remembered something. Now that you mention it, Sira, you're from the capital, right? Yes. 20 minutes had passed since they had departed from the mansion. Riley, who had been looking out the window with his chin on his hand, glanced at Sira. It seemed like her story about the capital sounded much more interesting than the view of Ifa village from out the window. Sira was already smiling with excitement. Everyone's so lively, and there's so many things to see. This is the first time you two are visiting Solia, right? As Sira clapped her hand with the question, Riley answered. Correct. Then you should look forward to it. Solia is a really good place. I can assuredly affirm it will be a wonderful memory. With your permission, allow me to act as your guide. Riley accepted Sira's favor with a laugh, then posed his first question. The capital, no, Solia should be filled with people, right? I'm not good with walking through crowds. It is true the central plaza is crowded. It is a four-way intersection which splits the capital into 4 districts, and it is the best place to hear the most recent gossip of the castle. Other than that, it should be fine. Young master should be able to handle it. 4 districts. The capital. The current destination for the party of 4, Solia, was so large that it was divided into upper, lower, left, right sections for the sake of organization. The right, left and lower districts were where most commoners and merchants lived. I remember seeing it in a book. A picture of a circle that was split into 4 equal parts. He remembers seeing the map which had the upper area denominated as the palace. So where did you live, Sira? Among the baggage they brought was also a map of Solia, and Iris handed it to her along with her question. As she looked at the map Iris handed her, she pointed her finger with a grin. She was pointing to the left district. Here, the left Solia. Left Solia. It was termed as such to make it easy to organize. Where I pointed is called the left Solia. Sira's finger trailed left, then down, and down to left again. This is called the lower Solia. And this is the right Solia. Ah! The upper is an exception. We just call it the Solia Castle. That is where our objective, the tournament, is held. Wow, so it's that large. It is a city, not to mention the capital. A major city holding the palace. You can't compare it to our mansion or if a village. As Sira gave a devious smile to boost their anticipation, Ian, who was driving the carriage, peeked behind him and joined in on the conversation. I have been to the capital a few times myself. Not only are there things to see, but delicious food to have had as well. Really? Iris' cheeks turned red with anticipation. Unlike his mother, Riley made a somber face with his chin locked onto his hand. Actually, concerning that dream you told me about before, young master. The carriage was driven over a bump with a dull thud. It seemed like the wheel had gone over a large pebble, but it didn't affect their travel. But, it was enough to change Riley's face. Among the snacks in Solia is something similar to what you've told me, about the dream. Something similar. Ian, who was expertly leading the horses, looked around the surroundings, then moved his eyes to the back. Yes, what was it? Carbonated drinks, was it? When you drink it, you can feel the bubbles pop in your throat. You always talked about how it's sweet, cold, shocking, and when you drink it with ice, that you could almost feel like you're going to heaven. Cola. Sprite. Carbonated drinks. Why, yeah, what about it? As Riley remembered the 3 soft drinks, he asked with a big gulp. Why am I sweating so much even though it's not summer? You did say it was a dream, so I'm not sure if it's the same as what you told me, but there is something like it. I guess you'd call it a sweet beer where you don't get drunk? No, it was more like a drink that seemed to pop more. The color was black. It's cola. Riley quickly stood and pressed his face toward the driver's seat. Riley. Why, young master? Iris and Sira flinched with surprise. There's Coke, here. Riley's jaws dropped. Right now. The thought of wanting to drink it right now was so strong that he was almost having withdrawal symptoms. Why, young master? Is there a problem? Ian, who could not look back as he was driving the carriage, began to drip cold sweat. It was because Riley suddenly leaned in towards the driver's seat with 2 sparkling eyes. What you said, is it true? As Riley stuttered his question, Ian also stuttered his answer. About the black sugar beer. Black sugar beer? Yes, that is the name of the drink I've told you. That's how it is called in Solia. Iris showed a reaction to the word beer. Beer. She was aware that her son had never drunk alcohol before. Although, that was excluding the previous life he had. As Iris only knows the Riley of this world, her thoughts weren't entirely wrong. You're going to make Riley drink beer. Sons first learn how to drink from their father. That is what Iris thought was norm. Haha, there is no need to worry. As I've said before, you cannot get drunk by drinking the black sugar beer. There is no alcohol in the drink itself. Even children aging 5 drink it without a problem in Solia. Even 5-year-olds. Of course. That's how Coke should be. A drink everyone wants on a hot day, regardless of age and gender. It's so devilishly addictive that you could even believe it was made by the gods. Although they say you gain weight and rot your teeth if you drink too much. Riley loved that drink over every other food and drink in the world. Ah, that fizziness. You drink it with food made from potatoes, right? Or a sandwich, perhaps a burger. Ian looked back after Riley's question. Because the carriage began to knock about as Ian looked back, he quickly looked forward and answered Riley's question. Yes, you seem to know it well. Was what he saw in his dream so clear? Ian scratched his head as his young master, who had never seen black sugar beer before, seemed to know about it better than he did. Well, it's as you say. The sweetness cannot be compared with the likes of fruit beer, and it goes well with salty food. Not to mention it's quite cheap, so the children love it. It is delicious. Even Ian, who had worked as a mercenary before, had tasted the drink very rarely. The black sugar beer was something you could only obtain in the capital, Solia. Well, the nobles don't seem to like it very much though. As Sira joined in on the conversation with those words, Riley quickly turned and looked at her. Why? It feels like peasant food. Dumbass. Iris frowned at the unintentional swear words. Riley. Watch your language. Ah, sorry. Riley quickly apologized as he scratched the back of his head sheepishly and took his seat again. It's just a surprise that what I dreamed about actually exists here. Black sugar beer. A drink called Coke in his previous life. Truth be told, it wasn't simply his imagination manifesting in his dream, but something he remembered from his past. Riley simply talked his way around it as there was no need to complicate things. Well, there are many things to see other than that. You can look forward to it. Can't you tell us more beforehand? As Sira promised them with a sly smile, Iris began to ask for more stories with a face full of curiosity. I could tell you more. Sira's face became mischievous. But wouldn't that take the fun out of your vacation with young master? Haha. I agree with Sira. It is always exciting to discover new things. Solia's peculiarities will make for good memories. Come on, are you really going to be like this? I will be your guide. But, I shall only watch. Ian looked after Riley's back, while Sira looked after Iris. Truthfully. For Iris and Riley of the Iphelleta house they serve, they wanted to see the two of them wander the city with joy. It crushed their hearts to watch them be oppressed by Lady Aurelie and her two sons. So they at least wanted to show them some happiness. All right. Fine. So mean. Iris turned her nose with a humph. Although her voice was sharp, there was a smile on her face. Coke. Coke. While everyone was smiling, Riley was the only exception. With a serious face and a finger to his mouth, he was thinking. Thinking about the black sugar beer. He was excited. Among his past life filled with pain and regrets, it was one of the few redeeming factors. He wanted to drink it soon. Coke. The boy sleeping on Iris' lap began to sleep talk and wriggle his fingers. Iris, who was lending him her lap, playfully poked at the boy's cheek, and the sleep talk stopped. It was Riley. My lady, isn't it tiring? No, I'm fine. I could ask you the same. We've only just swapped, it's all right. Even during the night, the carriage continued without stopping. It was thanks to the special horses pulling the carriage. Not only that, on the roof there was also an invention made by the wizards, a creation made thanks to their sweat and blood which allowed for safe travels even at night. How long until our arrival? Iris turned and faced Ian, who was sitting across from her. There is still some distance. You should sleep as well. Ian, who was sitting with his arms crossed, looked at the map after Iris' question and answered. At the latest we should arrive by tomorrow night. If we arrive earlier, then we need to have a tour with young master. That sounds nice, but shouldn't we register for the swordsmanship tournament first? Although Riley wasn't competing, watching the tournament also required registration. In order to be registered, they must send news of their arrival to the castle in Upper Solia, and request for a pass. That can be done by either Sira or me. At Ian's reply, Iris changed her question with a sorry face. It was about rest. Shouldn't you be sleeping too, Ian? Ian held out his hand at Iris' question. There are times I've been awake for a week straight during wartime. This much is a walk in the park for me. It was during Ian's prime days. He began to work as a mercenary when he was a teen, and participated in many battles. Comparing the days he spent next to a corpse with all his senses sharp and unable to sleep, this truly was a walk in the park. But that was in the past. He may have been like that in his prime, but Ian was beyond 70 years old now. Thanks to the training of his body and mana, he was healthy compared to others of his age, but Iris could not hide her worry at the sight of Ian's white hair. "My lady, how could you? I am still on active duty." "Ha! Is this how most swordsmen are like? It's good to rest when you can, but they are too stubborn." After arriving as Stein's concubine, she was so busy trying to recover from her sickness that she, who hadn't learned swordsmanship, couldn't comprehend many of their aspects. "If you can't sleep, then how about a chat?" Ian began to search through their packs to prepare a good tea to drink before sleep and handed one of the cups to Iris. "Ah, thank you." It was the tea made from the seeds given by Riley. Iris had a proud smile on her. "My lady." While they were waiting for the tea to cool down, Ian asked Iris a question. "You are not going to change your mind, right? About the tournament?" "Yes." Ian, who was as excited as Stein that Riley was going to compete in the tournament, lowered his eyes as he grabbed the cup's handle. Iris paused for a short moment, then answered, "No." Although she knew nothing about the sword, she gave an answer so unwavering, it was as if she would never back down on this matter. "My decision won't change. If Riley does not want to compete, then I don't want to force him." "I see. Ian. If you truly serve Riley, you shouldn't push him into this. You should support him." Iris tried to convince Ian. "You know, don't you? That Riley is worried. That he's worried about how everyone looks at him." Ian had always been next to Riley. Even when he would doze off on the mansion's apple tree. Even when he swung the wooden sword at the dummy and casted it away. Ian knew that young master was reading the atmosphere. And he also got the feel that he was hiding something. "I guess with age comes anxiousness." Ian broke the silence in the carriage. "Although I've just boasted that I'm still on active duty, I am in truth worried. I don't know when I'll disappear." "Ian." Ian's face became bitter, as he seemed to remember the time he collapsed before. "There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do but have hope in the young master. I saw the possibility. I saw hope." When he had first seen the talent in Riley that could not compare to Ryan, Lloyd, or even Stein, he was unable to sleep for 3 days. He was excited, and delighted that Riley would attain what he could never achieve. "You just told me, right? That I shouldn't push him into this, but support him instead." Although he was a servant, it was advice from an elder. Iris nodded her head. "I am the same as you, my lady. It may not be identical, but it is very similar. Just as you were resolute on declining his spot in the competition, I was hoping for his participation. Why would you go so far?" Iris's eyes seemed to ask that question. Ian replied with a detached look on his face. "Placing hope on the next generation is the duty of the old." As Ian muttered those words, "Dulking." The carriage was knocked about. At the sudden shaking, Ian and Iris looked at Sira, who was driving the carriage. "Ian Nim." Sira had a sharp look on her face, which wasn't her usual look. "It's an ambush." Riley, who was sleeping on Iris' lap, narrowly opened his eyes. Calm down. With the swords already drawn." Sira could not hold on to the reins and controlled the horses with her heels. Although there was some initial confusion among the horses due to the sudden stop, their ability to calm down after Sira's words showed how well trained these horses were. "It's crude, but the trap's made by someone with intelligence." Just a few inches away from the hooves was a taut rope. It was tied to the nearby trees and, as if intended to be used at night, was painted black. Thankfully Sira managed to sense the danger beforehand and skillfully stopped the carriage, otherwise it could have led to a huge accident wherein the carriage overturned. "Which bastards?" Ian stood up with his foul words. "Ian Nim. Take care of the carriage." After calming down the horses, Sira stood up and requested him to oversee the protection of Riley and Iris. The carriage was stopped in the middle of the forest. Although there was a path which allowed carriages and men to travel through, to the sides were bushes and trees whose leaves fluttered in the cold night wind. "Is there nothing more to the trap?" Sira looked about. She began to sniff with her nose as her eyes could not see far in the darkness. It's not done by humans. It's faint, but there is the stench of a beast. If humans are excluded, there aren't many species that could perform such a feat. As Sira began to narrow down the likely candidates, she looked down at the taut rope which was blocking the path. Should I cut the rope and continue on? The rope was simply painted, and didn't seem too difficult to cut. It would easily split in two even without the use of mana. I must hurry, before the trappers come. At the moment the culprits could not be seen. The decision was quick. It was just when Sira was about to come down from the driver's seat. Kill kill. From the darkness a snicker could be heard, and daggers coated with green liquid flew at Sira from her blind spot. Behind. Sira quickly pulled her sword back and spun her body. Sira's face was filled with frustration, realizing she was a tad late. Kook, it's annoying to fight with a blow from the Coke. Ting. A teacup flew towards Sira, and the dagger which was flying at Sira's back ricocheted. Start. As if he was having a strange dream, Riley woke up with a scream and knocked the teacup from Iris' hand. Riley? What's wrong? Ah! Iris could not see the dagger before and looked at her son with surprise. Well, I just had a weird dream. Phew, you surprised me. From inside the carriage. Ian, who was looking blankly at Sira's back, blinked his eyes repeatedly. Such an amazing coincidence? At such a perfect timing? At such a perfect angle? For Riley to knock the teacup in his sleep and hit the dagger midair? Coincidence? Is it a coincidence? Although the dagger came from behind, Sira, who managed to avoid it with a miracle, looked back at the carriage and nodded her head. She was planning to go to the spot where the dagger was originally thrown from. What the? It stopped? Why did we stop? Sira came down from the seat, and Riley, who just woke up, looked around in confusion and asked Ian. The truth is... Huop. Before Ian could explain, there was a shriek following Sira's battlecry. The scratchy voice didn't seem human, and sounded more like that of a monster. What's that noise? Riley was reassuring his mother, who was worried, and looked out the window to see what was happening. When his eyes adjusted to the dark, Riley could see Sira, who was fighting against midgets with green skin. They are goblins. Ian replied. Goblins. Riley remembered seeing them in his book. With a short stature, amber eyes, and sharp teeth like that of a shark's, they were monsters who had the intelligence of a 10-year-old child. Goblins. Riley narrowed his eyes, not knowing before that they really existed. So they are here too. Monsters. For them to really exist, and not just in the books. Half curiosity. Half reminiscent of his past. After seeing their appearance and their movements, Riley found them quite similar to the lesser demons he hunted back in his previous life. It seems the goblins made a trap with a rope and waited for a carriage to go by. And we fell right into the trap. Thankfully Sira noticed it and saved the carriage, and so we are in combat now. As Riley watched Sira fight, Ian provided a brief explanation of the current situation. Is she all right, being alone? With her skill, a few tens of goblins are nothing. She could fight against same number of orcs. It would be different if they were ogres. Orc? Ogre. Well, it's not very important right now. Even if Sira was hit by the dagger from before, it would have been no problem for her. Even if there was poison on the dagger, it was a crude one made by goblins. At Sira's level of mana control, she would have been able to fight while suppressing the effect of poison using her mana. It would have been a minor annoyance, but not a problem. There is a chance some may come from behind and threaten young Master or Lady Iris. So I must hold my position here. Believe in Sira. Young Master has yet. Ian stopped his words. He didn't know what words he should add. To become strong. Those words flew into his head, but Ian shook his head immediately. He didn't want to say any words that could disappoint Riley. Ian still remembered the time Riley struck the dummy back then. Anyway, our job is to wait for Syrah. It may take 20, no, about 30 minutes. They tend to become more feral when there is a full moon. During the full moon, monsters become slightly stronger. Riley also remembered reading about that in a book. But Riley could not say I know that. Because he was watching the way Syrah was fighting. With an uncomfortable look in his eyes. Riley. Iris carefully called her son's name. But Riley did not answer again. Slow. Riley's face was changing from uncomfortable to agonizing. Perhaps because of the memories of his past? Watching Syrah fight felt as if he was shoving potatoes down his throat. Is she being careful because of the dark? Why is she so slow? Syrah was taking some time to kill the goblins. Slow. It's too slow. Now is not the time to be stuck here. In a place not so far there was the drink he craved so much, the so-called black sugar beer. Just when he was about to have it. It frustrated him so much that he was rooted to this place. It would end much faster if Ian were to join in. Riley rolled his eye to the side and looked at Ian. Ian was also watching Syrah fight with a serious face. For the reason he mentioned before, he stayed behind to protect Riley and Iris. The Riley that Ian knew had no knowledge about swords at all. But if I were to tell him to join, things would get complicated. In a situation where he was desperate for some fizzy drinks, to watch Syrah fight was. Damn it! Maybe I should have brought a few more bodyguards. Riley frowned, since he brought only Ian and Syrah in order to avoid annoyances as much as possible. Should I just finish it? Although Riley was tempted to move on his own, there was something holding him back. It's the secret he had been holding onto until now. If it's Mother, it doesn't matter. Even if he were to show his skills, as she is oblivious to the way of the sword, she would simply smile proudly at her son. The result wouldn't change even if she did know swordsmanship. It was Ian and Syrah who were the problems. If it's now. Riley closed his eyes. Ian and Syrah. The two people who had watched over him for such a long time. Some of the only people whom he could trust. They had also helped him from his birth. When there weren't any eyes from the mansion. Maybe displaying some skill wouldn't hurt? Riley thought as such and stood up, unable to hold his frustration. Ian. Yes. Let's go take a look. Why, young master? Riley. It's good to rest, but when else can we see something like this? He had decided to give a hand if the situation was really bogged down. Hiding such intentions, Riley grabbed onto his mother's hand and stepped down from the carriage, with Ian following hurriedly behind. Syrah, who was currently engaging in combat with the goblins, turned her head when she felt a presence, and opened her eyes wide in surprise. There were 3 people coming to her. Those who should have been waiting until her fight was done were now making their way towards her. Young Master and Lady Iris too. Why? A goblin charged towards Syrah to avenge its fallen comrades, whom Syrah had easily cut in half. She then proceeded to look back at them. There's still so many left. He wasn't aware of the original number of goblins, but from what Riley could see, it would take not just 30 minutes but at least an hour for the carriage to start moving again. I came, to have a look. Riley answered with a forced smile on his face. A look. Syrah made a dejected expression as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard, and gave a warning as she cut down another goblin approaching her. Well, it's good to have a look, young master, but it's dangerous here. In the middle of the forest, there might be more ambushes. Ambushes. After hearing Syrah's words, Riley extended his mana secretly to everyone else, and scratched his chin as he confirmed that there weren't any hidden enemies in their surroundings. Ian agreed with Syrah and pointed towards the carriage. Syrah is correct. It's not a good sight anyway, so we should head back to the carriage. Riley ignored Ian's words and glanced at his mother. Iris was asking. What will you do? With her eyes as she looked back at Riley. It meant that she would respect his decision, no matter what Riley chose. Riley fell into silence as she watched Syrah fight the goblins. Because of the darkness, Syrah was being too cautious and only attacked the goblins who approached her, unable to charge amidst the fray herself. That was the reason for the prolonged battle. It's not just frustrating when I watch up close. If what he saw from the carriage was like shoving a potato down his throat, watching up close felt like shoving a sack of potatoes down his throat. Riley twitched his fingers as he felt his throat dry up in frustration. He needed a drink. He needed a fizz drink. Coke. I really want to have it soon. And not be stuck here because of something like this. Riley's eyes sharpened as he was becoming more impatient. Ah! Why's all this happening, just when I've decided to take it easy in this life? Riley's gaze turned away from Syrah and settled on the goblins instead. As he watched them, only looking for an opportunity in the dark from Syrah's blind spots, Riley's patience had finally reached its limit. Now it would take not 1, but 2 hours to finish. Do they just want to mess with my life? On second thought, they didn't just ruin his journey to drink Coke. He was also having a sweet dream on his mother's lap. They ruined that too. Young master. Restlessness. Frustration. Annoyance. Riley could not hold back his habit from his past and walked to Syrah. Young master, where are you going? It's Dange. Where Syrah was fighting. Ian quickly reached his hand out, worried about Riley who was walking directly towards the goblins. Ian. But Ian's hand could not reach Riley's. He saw them. The eyes which were about to explode from frustration. The glistening eyes silently telling him to watch. Young master. With a flinch, Ian looked blankly at Riley's back. Syrah. Finally. Riley approached Syrah and spoke. Why, young master? Why? It's dangerous. Please go back to. Because Syrah was unaware of Riley's approach, she quickly told Riley to return as his voice could be heard just behind her. Syrah, do you? Riley asked without a concerned or threatening tone in his voice. As if he wasn't aware of Syrah's feelings. Do you not use your legs in your moves? Sorry. This is frustrating. Seriously. Give them here. Riley crumbled his face as Syrah didn't understand his words, and stepped forward after snatching her twin swords. Why, young master? Stop. It's going to take the whole night at this rate. As he disregarded Syrah's words, he adjusted the grip on the two swords and looked at the goblins in the dark. Just a quick glimpse, and he could tell that they were similar to the lesser demons he'd cut down in his previous life. Now then. How much should I show them? Riley had a quick thought about what to do. As he'd pushed the body to its limit from the fight with Tez, he's decided to fight purely with his swordsmanship this time. This much should be all right. And, it can teach Syrah as well. With those thoughts Riley began to speak again. Use your legs. Your legs. It's frustrating. Are you trying to refrain from looking too far ahead? I can't tell, whether you don't know or don't want to. Young master. Syrah, you're acting like there's a circle around you and you don't want to move out of the circle. That's the feeling I get. Then there's no way for you to take the initiative yourself. It takes too long. There was no reply from Syrah. Riley realized that she was simply staring blankly at him, so Riley scratched his head and began to take action. So what I mean is, if you use the legs. Riley moved forward. If it was her from the past, she would have never allowed Riley to act as he was now. It was clearly dangerous. But there was that other time she received advice from Riley. She remembered how he told her to keep it a secret. She couldn't stop Riley. Maybe. That was all she could mutter. Keek. Iris gripped her hands together into a fist as she watched. As Riley charged at them, and the goblins began to rush forward with a shriek in kind to avenge their brothers. Hey! Riley pushed in while dropping the two swords in a slight angle. His foot slid on the ground, and when the goblin was right in front of him. Kuek. 1. No, 2 goblin heads flew into the air. You can. Riley's hands and feet continued to move. More heads flew in the air, as Riley continued to speak. Keek. Riley continued to move his feet as he parried the dagger coming at him from the side. And number 8. The 8th goblin head flew into the air. Syrah's jaws dropped. What is that? It was an art. Riley began to move his fingers as he moved forward. One of the 2 swords he was holding was flipped and clutched in the reverse grip. It was slow compared to Syrah's practice, but much more stable. Apply it like this. As Riley spoke, the remaining 2 goblins charged at him simultaneously. Their shrieks were much louder than the others, as if determined to avenge the dead. But Riley did not allow their weapons to reach him. Kek. Thud. A dull sound could be heard. Riley had used his leg. The kick didn't have mana in it, so it didn't have the power to kill, but it was enough to push the goblin back and gain some distance. The last one. With the distance created, he stabbed the sword he was holding in reverse into the goblin's head and rushed at the goblin who was kicked away. As if it were a dance, Riley dashed past the goblin's side. Riley's sword was not strong like the Iphelleta's strong blade, first son, or fast like the quick blade, second son. It had no clear strengths. That was obvious. But, well, this is how you do it. Riley stabbed the sword into the ground as he finished talking. Then the goblin he dashed past began to fall. Ian looked at Riley as if he was possessed. Simply. The potential Ian saw in Riley was simply the affinity to mana. It was the potential which would allow him to use the aura blade which imbued mana onto the sword with the greatest efficiency. But what he just saw was more shocking than mere affinity to mana. What did I just see? His affinity with the sword. Genius was not enough to describe it, but something more. Now, let's go. After cleaning out the goblins in a flash, Riley put his hands in the pocket and walked back to the carriage. Did you know? Ian asked Iris, who was on the seat across from him on the carriage that started to move once more. Perhaps it was because he was tired due to exterminating the goblins, but Riley was exploring dreamland while using his mother's lap as a pillow, just like before. What? Iris tilted her head with a question mark as if saying that she didn't understand Ian's query. About young master. As if he still didn't believe what he saw, Ian's face was complicated. Sleeping peacefully after that amazing display of skill. He was so shocked that he didn't even feel like waking him up and asking. I don't know. As she didn't know anything about swordsmanship, Iris didn't understand what Ian was asking about, so she continued speaking after blinking a few times. How should I reply? I don't know anything about swordsmanship. Although she came into the Iphelleta house, which was famous for its swordsmanship, as a concubine, she had never held a sword before because of her unceasing attempts to cure her illness. Therefore, Iris didn't know how great a skill her son showed just before. But she knew that it was awesome. And she felt relief at the fact that her son was safe and uninjured. I also felt my heart sink when Riley charged at the goblins too, you know. When looking at how Riley was fighting before, she had clenched her fists so hard that marks of her fingernails were as clear as day on her palms. I see. Iris looked down after Ian replied blankly. She was gazing at Riley, who was sleeping in her lap. My lady, about this. Keep it a secret. About to open his mouth while clenching the sides of his pants, Ian flinched. Hey! Keep it a secret, don't tell anyone in the mansion. Not even the Count. W.Y. Syrah, who was driving the carriage from the driver's seat, glanced back inside. It wasn't an overreaction for Ian to be puzzled. She too felt the same. But she didn't ask why. This was because she was also asked the same thing from Riley. Because Riley wanted it. My lady. Shush. In front of Ian, whose voice was raising, Iris raised her index finger to her lips and made a shh sound. That action didn't only entail worry about Riley waking up. Please, Ian. How could mother and son be so similar? Syrah snorted while looking back at the road at Iris's action. It was because Riley had made the same gesture last time. The capital, Solia. The weather here was sunny, and the atmosphere wasn't that bad either. Syrah smiled at the mother and son pair after leaving the carriage, which they rode all the way from the Iphelleta house at the carriage house. Now. Welcome to Solia. You look like you're excited. Of course, it's been a long time since I've come home. Currently the three people, including Riley, were standing in left Solia. It was a place that Syrah knew well. Anyway, I feel a bit sorry for Ian. I feel bad that we sent him to Castle Solia on his own. It had started with 4 people, but only 3 people remained. Only Ian couldn't be seen in their party. The reason was because he needed to get the admission tickets for the capital's swordsmanship tournament. No, my lady. It was for the best to send Ian Nim. Syrah rolled her eyes to the ground, muttering at Iris's worry. Riley nodded as if saying that he agreed. If the one who went off to get the tickets was not Ian but Syrah, it would be terrifying. He would definitely go young master this, young master that, and follow Riley around all day making a fuss as he tried to talk about what had happened the evening before. Then where should we go first? Obviously. A bead of sweat rolled down Riley's cheek. It's Riley whose throat was burning to a crisp when the carriage entered Solia. The first destination had already been decided. Coke, no, black sugar beer. We need to go drink that. As if knowing he was going to say that, Syrah smiled and started walking. There's a cafe near here that I used to visit frequently. It should still be selling what young master wants, so let's go there first, might as well avoid the sunlight. Although the sky held no clouds and it was a cool day, it was too hot to walk around outside. Syrah, who was holding a parasol to cover Iris, looked around her surroundings. It was because she had to be prepared for unknown threats because Ian had left, and she was alone in escorting the 2 people. How is it, Syrah? Has it changed a lot from before? There don't seem to be any big differences. If there was something that changed, wouldn't it be the posters that advertise the soon-to-open swordsmanship tournament? Syrah replied after seeing the swordsmanship posters stuck around everywhere. The capital's swordsmanship tournament. A festival that not only nobles, but also commoners show great interest in. It was because the nobles from all the different territories gather in one place. To the nobles it becomes a market of amity, and to commoners it's an event which allows them to see the future leaders of their territory. Now that I look around, they're stuck everywhere. Well, it seems that young master doesn't have an interest in it though. Riley, who was walking with both his hands stuck in his pockets, turned to Syrah, and started to bother her about when they were going to arrive. Just walk a little further. There, do you see that orange roof? At the sight of glass cups filled with black liquid in the midst of people who were gathered under the roof that Syrah pointed to, Riley's eyes went wide. Oh! At Riley's appearance the 2 women went pfft, and chortled. You have the same thoughts as Riley, right? About the swordsmanship tournament? Syrah asked Iris. Yes. I, too, don't really. Iris also didn't want to force Riley into the tournament if he didn't want to. It was because if she forced him to participate, then she would be breaking her promise, since they didn't come to Solia to participate, but rather to spectate. Ha, it would be nice if we could watch it and return without any problems. The issue is Ian Nim. If he accidentally touched on young master's sensitive part and a hide-and-seek started in Solia, forget about spectating or whatever, they'd all be absolutely screwed. Shock. The third young master of the swordsmanship family, the Iphelleta house, runs away from home, searching for a stray child. Black hair, a relaxed face. Those kind of posters would be put up in Solia. That wouldn't possibly happen, right? Ha, ha ha. Riley, who arrived first and was ordering black sugar beer from the clerk, turned around and raised a question mark as if asking if they called him. This actually existed. After the black sugar beer, which had bubbles floating up, came out, Riley, who kept on mumbling the word Coke before drinking it, had teary eyes as soon as he drank a sip. It couldn't be said to be the same taste that he was reminiscent of, but it was still able to get rid of the thirst he had for so long. The customers near Riley looked at him curiously, as if asking if it was that tasty. "Mother, can I drink one more cup?" "Go ahead." Riley, who already emptied one cup and had its ice rattling, asked Iris and went to the clerk straight away. As Riley's hand went up, the tactful clerk brought out one more cup of black sugar beer. As if saying that even the dew on the cup was lovely, Riley, who was looking at the newly brought out drink as if he was in a trance, chugged it. "Young master, you sound like a grown-up man. What can I do when my throat is stinging?" Although he claimed that it was stinging, that it was hurting, the edge of Riley's mouth went up. Syrah, who was smiling at the appearance of her young master, who looked happier than ever, narrowed her eyes as she spotted some suspicious individuals while keeping an eye on their surroundings. "What are you doing? I'm telling you I didn't do it." "Who do you think you're lying to, B*tch? There was a posse of grown men, and one girl. It didn't look like they were going to show hostility towards them, but what Syrah saw was a scene where a group of men who looked quite frightening dragging away a girl who looked to be about 16 years old by her wrist. This. Hey! Someone help me!" The girl who was caught by the men started to cry out for help. It was an emotion which showed naivete. "Don't bother. This B*tch got caught while trying to pickpocket our wallets. I never did such a thing." As the girl shouted and the people all looked at them, the men waved their hands dismissively as if telling them to stop paying attention. In contrast with the girl's sincere pleas for help, the men's faces contained bits of malice. "Those bastards!" Straight away figuring out the situation. As Syrah, who was just about to explode out of her seat because she couldn't take any more of the brazen lawlessness, Riley gave her a piece of advice. "Syrah, don't bother." Syrah's shoulders flinched even before she could get off the seat. Iris tilted her head as she too couldn't understand why Riley stopped Syrah. "That's all an act." "Hey!" Riley turned around and called to the clerk. "Auntie! That's not right." Riley, who accidentally called out to the clerk like he did in his previous life, quickly changed his words. "Clerk lady! There are straws here, right? Please give me a straw." "Yes, I'll bring it over right away." Although he liked putting the Coke to his mouth and chugging it, Riley, who also liked to use a straw and suck it away, ordered a straw and leaned his back on the back supporter of the chair. "Young master, what do you mean, an act?" Syrah, who was looking again closely at the situation that was still escalating, asked quietly. It simply didn't look like an act. Their eyes were chasing Syrah's sword. "Well, I don't know what they're planning, but..." "Ah, thank you." Riley, who received the straw from the clerk and placed it in between the ice and the black sugar beer, started to suck the drink and looked at the men and the girl in the commotion. "Come here. Let go." They were still getting further away. It felt like if they were left alone, the men would just end the girl's life. If that girl was going to ask for help, if those men were going to do something to her, their eyes and their heads should have been spinning around. But Riley swallowed a few mouthfuls of Coke and continued. Their eyes were only directed on Syrah's sword. What might that mean? Riley made a face that said that he felt alive after draining the cup of all of its contents via the straw and jangled the ice. "Pooha! Let's not get entangled in such annoying matters."